everything we can on that. That's banning non-essential workers, that's social distancing, that's closing restaurants, closing gyms, just flatten the curve, slow the infection rate. One issue we had was in New York City, where we had a higher level of density than we wanted, especially in the New York City parks, especially with young people. I've been as direct as I can and as blunt as I can on young people and the misinformation that they have. You can catch the coronavirus. You may think you are a superhero. You're really not. You can catch it, and you can transfer it, which makes you dangerous to the people who you love. But the New York City parks have been a problem. I saw the problem myself firsthand. I spoke to Mayor de Blasio. I spoke to Speaker Johnson. We said come up with a plan in 24 hours that everybody agreed with. They came up with a plan. We're now implementing that plan. I signed off on that plan. The plan is going to pilot closing streets in New York City because we have much less traffic in New York City. We have many fewer vehicles in New York City. Open streets. People want to walk. They want to go out and get some air. You want a less dense area. So pilot closing streets to cars, opening streets to pedestrians. We'll also enact mandatory playground social density, which is probably a new concept. No close contact sports in a playground. No basketball, for example. You cannot do it. We're asking people to do that on a voluntary basis. If there is non-compliance with that, we will then make it mandatory and we will actually close the playgrounds. We don't want to do that because playgrounds are a place to go out and get open air, but you have to exercise social density even in a playground. And again, it's voluntary. The mayor is going to make it clear that this is important to the people of the city. If it doesn't happen, we will actually close down the playgrounds. I don't want to do that, but we do need to reduce the spread of the infection, and that is what is most important. This is very interesting because the evidence suggests that the density control measures may be working. And again, we're doing this from projections. But look at this because it's interesting. This past Sunday, the projection was that hospitalizations were doubling every 2 days, okay? On Monday, the numbers suggested that the hospitalizations were doubling every 3.4 days. On Tuesday, the projection suggested that the hospitalizations were doubling every 4.7 days. Now, that is almost too good to be true. But the theory is, given the density that we're dealing with, it spreads very quickly. But if you reduce the density, you can reduce the spread very quickly. So these projections, I've watched them bounce all over the place, and I don't place a great deal of stock in any one projection. All due respect to all the great academics and statisticians who are doing it. But this is a very good sign and a positive sign. Again, I'm not 100% sure it holds or it's accurate, but the arrows are headed in the right direction, and that is always better than the arrows headed in the wrong direction. So to the extent people say, boy, these are burdensome requirements, social distancing, no restaurants, no non-essential workers. Yes, they are burdensome. By the way, they are effective and they're necessary, and the evidence suggests at this point that they have slowed the hospitalizations. And this is everything. Slowing the hospitalization rates coming into the hospitals are everything so the hospitals can deal with the rate of people coming in. At the same time, increase hospital capacity. What is the high point? You see that line in the beginning? Well, we're studying is what is the high point of that line? What is the apex of that line? That is the point of the greatest number of people coming into the hospital system. So that's our greatest load, is the apex. And when is that going to happen? Again, that is a projection. Again, that moves around. But the current projection is that could be in 21 days. So ramp up the hospital capacity to be able to handle that apex volume. How do you ramp up hospital capacity? You ramp up beds, you ramp up staff, and you ramp up the equipment. And the ventilators are the problem in equipment, as we've discussed many times. Where are we on that? Beds, we may need 140,000. We have 53,000. That's the existing capacity of hospitals. We told all hospitals they have to increase their capacity by 50%. I told them that myself on a conference call yesterday. This is a burden for the hospitals to now say you have to increase capacity 50%, but I have to tell you, they were very generous about it, and they understood what we were dealing with, and they were eager to step up to the plate. If you increase hospital capacity by 50%, that gets you 27,000 beds. On top of the existing, it takes you to 80. Some hospitals, I asked as a goal, try to increase by 100% your capacity. 50% was the minimum. The goal was 100. I believe some hospitals will actually try to do that. And I encourage them to try to do that, as impossible as it sounds. But now is the time to be aggressive and do things you've never done before. If some of them do that, and I believe some of them will, that would be additional 5,000 beds. We get to 85,000 beds. FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, what we're doing in Javits Center, what we're doing in the Westchester Convention Center, Westbury campus, Stony Brook campus, that's another 4,000, takes us to 89,000. The U.S. Navy ship Comfort, the President dispatched, that would be 1,000 beds to backfill from hotels, that takes you to 90,000. If we take all the state dormitories in downstate New York, that could get us an additional 29,000 beds. We'd be at 119,000 beds. You're still not at the 140 that you need, but then we're looking at hotels, we're looking at former nursing homes, converting other facilities to make up the differential. So a lot, creative, aggressive, but in life you do what you have to do. And that's what we're doing on the bed capacity. Protective equipment, we have been shopping around the world. We have a whole team that's doing it. Right now, we have enough protective equipment, gloves, masks, gowns, for all the hospitals statewide that are dealing with it. I brought down a shipment to New York City yesterday. Today, no hospital, no nurse, no doctor can say legitimately, I don't have protective equipment. Right now, and for the foreseeable future, we have a supply. We do not yet have secured a supply for 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now, but we are still shopping. And taking care of this immediate need was also good news and a good job by the team. And again, we are still shopping for more equipment. Ventilators, ventilators, ventilators. We need 30,000. We have, in the existing hospital system, 4,000 ventilators. This is just in the normal operation of hospitals, etc. We have purchased 7,000, and we are still shopping. Federal government has sent 4,000. We're exploring splitting, where one ventilator could do 2 patients. Italy has had to do this because they were forced to do it. I want to see if we can study it and do it a little smarter and have a little more time experimenting with it, but we're looking at splitting the ventilators. We're still working with the federal government to try to find more ventilators, but that is our single greatest challenge, are the ventilators. Again, the ICU beds, that really means a ventilated bed. Because again, this is the number one piece of equipment that we need. You have beds, you have equipment, you need staff, and you need staff understanding that some staff is going to get sick and they're going to be out. So we have been working on putting together a surge healthcare force. Go back to the retirees, go back to nurses and doctors who may not be in the hospital direct medical care occupation, and ask them to sign up for possible reserve duty. God bless them, 40,000 people have signed up as a surge healthcare force. 2,000 physicians, anesthesiologists, emergency room technicians, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, nurse anesthetists, respiratory, RNs, LPNs. 40,000 people have signed up. That's a big, big deal, because you can create beds, you can find the equipment, you have to have the staff. And you have to have the staff for those additional beds, which are not now in the hospital system. And you have to have staff when the existing staff gets ill. Or, by the way, just can't work the hours that we're going to need people to be working. So that's very good. This is also very exciting. I don't know that anyone else has done this. We've talked about the emotional stress that this brings on people, and the mental health stress and the mental health challenges. No one's really talking about this. We're all concerned about the immediate critical need, the life and death of the immediate situation, which is right. But don't underestimate the emotional trauma that people are feeling and the emotional health issues. We asked for mental health professionals to voluntarily sign up to provide online mental health services. 6,000 mental health professionals agreed to volunteer to provide mental health services for people who need it. How beautiful is that? And the hotline, 1-844-863-9314. You can call that hotline. You can schedule an appointment with a mental health professional, totally free, to talk to them about what you're feeling and what stress you're feeling. And again, God bless the 6,000 mental health professionals who are doing this 100% free, on top of whatever they have to do in their normal practice. And I'm sure in their normal practice, they're busy. So this is really an extraordinary step by them. Federal government, I spoke with President Trump several times. I spoke with him last night. I spoke with him this morning. I've spoken to people in the White House who are handling these operations. I've spoken with the Vice President. I've spoken with Jared Kushner, who is a New Yorker. He knows New York, and he's working in the White House, and he's been extraordinarily helpful on all of these situations. What we're working on is a common challenge. No one has these ventilators, and no one ever anticipated a situation where you would need this number of ventilators to deal with a public health emergency. So we have purchased everything that can be purchased. We're now in a situation that we're trying to accelerate production of these ventilators, and a ventilator is a complicated piece of equipment. The President and his team, I think, are using the DPA well, because it's basically a leverage tool when you're dealing with private companies, right? We need your help. We can demand your help, or you could agree to help, and we need you to step up and increase production. Even with that, there's a ramp-up time for a company to put together the supply chain, put together the workforce, and get these things up and running. So Ford, you hear, is going to help. General Motors is going to help. The problem is our timeline is so short. We're looking at an apex 21 days in that range. to get ventilators and these business consortiums put together, supply chain, design team, ramped up and delivered 30,000 ventilators is an extraordinarily difficult task. And it's something that our team is working on with the White House team. And I want to thank the President for his cooperation and his team for their cooperation. We're getting very creative. We're talking to countries around the world, as well as new companies that could do production. We're also talking to the White House about another concept. New York has the greatest need in terms of numbers. New York also has the most critical need in terms of timing, right? We talk about our apex, we talk about that curve. Different localities, different regions around the country are going to have different curves. We are in some ways first. Our case numbers went up first. Our trajectory is first by a long shot. Different regions will have their curve at different times. What I said to the President and his team was, look, rather than saying we have to provide equipment for the entire country at one time, let's talk about addressing the critical need in that hot spot. Once that hot spot turns, because you have an apex and then you have a curve, and the curve is relatively short, once you address that hot spot with that intensity, intense equipment, intense personnel, then shift to the next hot spot and have more of a rolling deployment across the country than a static deployment, right? I was in the federal government at HUD. I worked on dozens of disasters. You deal with the disaster in front of you at that time, and then you move on to the next disaster. And I think that rolling deployment could work here. And on behalf of New York, I said we will be 100% helpful. We need help from the entire country right now. We need resources from the entire country right now. And because our apex is first and our numbers are highest. But the apex high point will be sequential across the country. So I said to the White House, send us the equipment that we need, send us the personnel. As soon as we get past our critical moment, we will redeploy that equipment and personnel to the next hotspot. And I will personally guarantee it and personally manage it. So if you send us 15,000 ventilators, and then after our curve, Los Angeles needs 15,000 ventilators, we can take the equipment from here, we can take the personnel from here, we can take the lessons from here. You know, we go first. We're going to learn things that nobody else has learned because we're going to be the first one through the chute. And I personally guarantee that we will bring that equipment, we will bring that personnel, we'll bring that technical assistance to the next hotspot. I said to the President, I'll be part of going to the next hotspot with our team. We're asking the country to help us. We will return the favor. And we are all in this together. And we're asking for their help and their consideration, and we will repay it with dividends. The Senate is also considering a $2 trillion bill, which is, quote unquote, relief for businesses, individuals, and governments. It would really be terrible for the state of New York. The $2 trillion bill, what does it mean for New York state government? It means $3.8 billion. $3.8 billion sounds like a lot of money. Rob Mahika, the budget director, can talk you through the numbers, but we're looking at a shortfall, revenue shortfall of 9, 10, 15 billion dollars. This response to this virus has probably already cost us $1 billion. It will probably cost us several $billion when we're done. New York City only gets $1.3 billion from this package. That is a drop in the bucket as to need. I spoke to our House delegation, congressional delegation, this morning. I said to them, this doesn't do it. You know, I understand the Senate theory and the Republican theory, but we need the House to make adjustments. In the House bill that went over, New York State got $17 billion. In the Senate bill, we get $3.8 billion. Well, you just big spending. We're not a big spending state. I cut taxes every year. I have the lowest growth rate of the state budget in modern political history, okay? So we are frugal and we are efficient. I'm telling you these numbers don't work, and I told the House members that we really need their help. In terms of numbers, total tested, we're up to 103,000 people. New tests, we're up to 12,000. As of yesterday, about 28% of all testing nationwide has been performed by the state of New York. The state of New York is doing more testing than any state in the United States of America. And I'm very proud of the team on how we've mobilized and gotten this testing up and running. People ask, how does this testing work? Any hospital in the state can perform testing. You can walk into a hospital in Buffalo, New York. If you show the symptoms and meet the protocol, you can be tested. Strategically, we deploy testing in the most dense areas. Where do we set up the drive-thrus, et cetera? Why? Because we're hunting positives. We're hunting positives so we can isolate them and reduce the spread. You're more likely to get positives in high positive areas, right? Set up a drive-thru in the Bronx versus set up a drive-thru in Chautauqua County. You're going to get more positives in the Bronx, and that's what we want. But anyone, anywhere in the state, you have symptoms, you're concerned, you can walk into any hospital. That hospital can get a test performed. Number of positive cases, we're up to 30,000. Number of new cases, 5,000. Again, you see the numbers, 17,000 New York City, 4,000 in Westchester, 3,000 in Nassau County. Relatively, Westchester, we have dramatically slowed what was an exponential increase. So, again, on the good news side, can you slow the rate of infection? Yes. How do you know? Look at what we did in Westchester. That was the hottest cluster in the United States of America. We closed the schools, we closed gatherings, we brought in testing, and we have dramatically slowed the increase. Nassau County is 3,000. They're relatively right behind Westchester. They were at like 0 when Westchester had started. So we can slow it, and we have slowed it. Again, you see it spreading across the state, which we said it would. Current numbers, 30,000 tested, positive. 12% of those who test positive are hospitalized. 3% of the positives are in ICU. Okay? This is deep breath time again. I'm anxious, I'm nervous. What does it mean? 30,000 tested positive. 12% are in the hospital. 3% are in ICU. If you look at those 3%, they're going to be predominantly senior citizens, people with underlying illnesses, people with emphysema, people with a compromised immune system. That's what this effort is all about. All the noise, all the energy, it's about that 3%. Take a deep breath. Now, that 3%, that's my mother, that's your mother, that's your sister. These are people we love. These are our grandparents. And we're going to do everything we can to protect every one of them. And I give the people of the state of New York my word that we're doing it. But we're talking about 3% of the people who tested positive, who we're worrying about. Most impacted states, we're 30,000. Next closest state is New Jersey at 3, California 2. This is a really dramatic differential. And this is what I argue to anyone who will listen. We have 10 times the problem that the next state has, which is New Jersey. You compare us to California, which is larger in terms of population. We have 15 times the problem. Now you have to ask yourself, why? Why does New York have such a high number? And again, in the totality, we understand what it means, but why does New York have such a high number? And this is my personal opinion. I like to make sure that I separate facts from personal opinion. The facts I give you are the best facts I have. And again, the data changes day to day, but I give you exactly what I have on a day-to-day basis. Personal opinion, why does New York have so many more cases than any other state? How can it be? You're 15 times the number of California. I mean, it really is breathtaking when you think about it. State of Massachusetts with 30 times the number of cases. So why is the question that people ask me? Two answers. Answer one is because we welcome people from across the globe. We have people coming here, we have people who came here from China, who came here from Italy, who came here from countries all around the globe. We have international travelers who were in China and who were in Italy and who were in Korea and who came here. And I have no doubt that the virus was here much earlier than we even know. And I have no doubt that the virus was here much earlier than it was in any other state, because those people come here first. That's the first answer. The second answer is because we are close. Because we are close. We talk about the virus and how it transfers in a dense area. It's literally because we are close. Because we live close to one another. Because we're close to one another on the street. Because we live in close communities. Because we're close to one another on the bus. We're close to one another in the restaurant. We're close to one another in the movie theater. And we have one of the most dense, close environments in the country. And that's why the virus communicated the way it did. Our closeness makes us vulnerable. Our closeness makes us vulnerable. That spatial closeness makes us vulnerable. But it's true that your greatest weakness is also your greatest strength. And our closeness is what makes us who we are. That is what New York is. Our closeness is what makes us special. Our acceptance, our openness is what makes us special. It's what makes us feel so connected one to another. It's what makes us so accepting of one another. It is the closeness that makes us the human beings that we are. The closeness is that New York humanity that I think exists nowhere else. The closeness is what makes our sense of community. And there's a gentleman who I still look to for guidance and for leadership and for inspiration. He's not here anymore for you. He's still here for me. But he said things more profound and more beautifully than most other people ever have. And one of the things he said that is so appropriate for today, we believe in a single fundamental idea that describes better than most textbooks and any speech that I could write what a proper government should be. The idea of family, mutuality, the sharing of benefits and burdens for the good of all, feeling one another's pain, sharing one another's blessings, reasonably, honestly, fairly, without respect to race or sex or geography or political affiliation. That is New York. It is that closeness, that concept of family, of community. That's what makes New York, New York. And that's what made us vulnerable here. But it is also that closeness and that connection and that humanity and that sharing that is our greatest strength. And that is what is going to overcome at the end of the day. I promise you that. I can see how New Yorkers are responding. I can see how New Yorkers are treating one another. I see the 6,000 mental health volunteers. I see the 40,000 healthcare workers stepping up. I see the vendors calling me saying, I can help. That's New York. That's New York. And that, my friends, is undefeatable. And I am glad in some ways that we're first with this situation. Because we will overcome.
We've been listening to New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo at his daily press conference, giving the latest data, statistics, and the status of the coronavirus in the state of New York and the city of, including the city of New York, where it appears to clearly be the national epicenter. So, Lisa, once again, some grim numbers, but some continued optimism from the governor.
Yeah, well, he said, just to give you the numbers, New York City has 17,856 cases. That's up nearly 3,000. And New York State has more than 30,000 coronavirus cases. Interesting to hear what he had to say about social distancing and the whole concept. Perhaps there are some signs that it is working to sort of slow this down a little bit. Yesterday, he sounded pretty dire. At the same time, talking about how people are still going to playgrounds and still playing basketball, and that's got to stop. And if it doesn't, they're going to actually enforce it, which raises a question about the National Guard or how they're going to do that, given the fact that they want to make it mandatory at some point if people can't follow it voluntarily.
Yeah, exactly right. So, kind of balancing, I guess, some of the grim statistics, some of the fact that we're still on the upward sloping part of the curve. We have not reached the apex. That apex is still, he was saying today, 21 days away, approximately based upon forecasts. But there are some signs that it's working, particularly up in New Rochelle and some of the areas that were initially hard hit, but needs perhaps even more to be done on that front.
Yeah, and we are also hearing about morgues overfilling, and we also heard about in Hyde Park, for example, in the United Kingdom in London, preparing for a mass morgue, the concept of a lot more deaths than expected. It's really a gruesome reality as people struggle, and as basically this does create a fatal situation for a lot of people. Right now in markets, you are seeing a little bit of green, and I think, Paul, all eyes are going to turn to Washington, D.C., and it's great that coming up is balance of power with David Weston to really talk about the progress made there, how much is being given out, not just to the corporations, but small businesses, the $1,200 that each family supposedly will receive depending on income. This is sort of, people are optimistic that maybe they'll get some sort of deal signed today.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's clearly what the market is looking for. It's a key issue, Lisa. We had the Fed step in. Now it's time for Congress. It's time for fiscal stimulus. Probably just the first round, quite frankly.
Yeah. And meanwhile, when you look at the bond market, you are seeing a bid in, which is helping to support things. I'm Lisa Abramowitz with Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings.
Life. It's a funny old game, isn't it? 1 minute you're on top, the next, you need all the help you can get.
Yeah, later, yeah.
So make sure you're there for those around you. Don't just be a spectator. Be a supporter. Bleed for life. Join us at blood.co.uk.
The happy family of 3 were about to welcome a new member. That's right, they were finally getting a dog.
Buy on eBay, dog bed from £12.
First, they had to make a few adjustments.
Sell white rug.
And prepare the kids for the reality of owning a pet.
Buy biodegradable poop bags from under £6.
Everyone instantly fell in love with Little Rocky. Unfortunately, Little Rocky fell in love with a cushion. Buy, sell, eBay.
Delivery costs may apply.
It's Tune In Sports on this day, March 25th, 1972. UCLA men's basketball wins its 6th consecutive national basketball title.
UCLA has won its 6th consecutive NCAA basketball championship, and pandemonium reigns as delirious UCLA players are congratulated by their Florida State rivals as well as their fans.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, click on Sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Leave it to the New York Times to make the most intelligent pop music podcast out there.
Welcome to the New York Times Popcast.
On the Popcast, the Times music staff gets together for a weekly roundtable on the hottest topics in popular music. From award show autopsies and reactions to new releases to difficult-to-process scandals and emerging themes in the music landscape, hear distinguished music critics share their perspectives on the latest music news, songs, albums, and artists of note on the New York Times Popcast. Search and favorite Popcast to join the conversation.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks decidedly mixed right now. The Dow surging 552 points. That is a gain of 2.7%. S&P is up 20. That is a gain right now of 0.8%. And NASDAQ is falling 9 points, lower now by just about 0.1%. U.S. equities hoping for their first back-to-back gain since the coronavirus crisis began. Investors, though, are awaiting details on unprecedented government spending packages aimed at countering the hit from the pandemic. Treasuries are advancing with the 10-year up 13/32 yield right now, 0.80%. Gold is down 1.2% right now, lower by $19 the ounce at $16.12. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.8%. $23.82 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. Now, what about stimulus? What about the markets? Seema Shah is chief strategist at Principal Global Investors.
I do think it will be a support. I mean, the strong signal here really is that there's a willingness to do something, and there is a willingness to do something relatively quickly. Of course, we've been frustrated in markets over the last 7-10 days that this has happened, in the market's view, a little bit too slowly. But now it's here, and it will start to work.
Torsten Slok, chief economist at Deutsche Bank, interviewed earlier today on Bloomberg Radio and television. We're keeping an eye on Target shares this morning. Target shares are trading lower right now. Target is down by 7.5%. Target has dumped the full-year sales and profit forecast it gave just 3 weeks ago. Even as sales in March have soared, underscoring the difficulty retailers face in navigating the unfolding coronavirus crisis. Again, recapping here, equities higher across the board. NASDAQ just turning positive again. NASDAQ up 3 points, up less than 0.1%. S&P up 25, up by 1.1%. The Dow up 618, up by 3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We need an economy that works for everybody.
I am the one who has the broadest coalition.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
These lawyers brought the case, and in my view, they should be sanctioned. We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships. The administration
is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Congress agrees to a $2 trillion stimulus package. The energy sector continues to reel from the double effect of the crisis and a price war, and doctors are facing an overwhelming need for care in specific locations all around the nation. What do they need from us? From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, welcome to Balance of Power. Every day we hear about the stress being put on our healthcare system and that we're only beginning to get a glimpse of what's likely to come. We welcome now someone whose job it is to provide physicians to staff our hospitals around the country. Some 27,000 clinicians in 45 states, including 11,000 working in emergency rooms. He is Jim Recton, and he's president and CEO of Envision Healthcare. So, Jim, welcome. Really good to have you here. Give us a sense from the front lines. How does it look right now?
Yeah, David, thanks for having me on. On the front lines, it's in many ways a tale of two stories. We've got a number of emergency rooms around the country that are seeing increased volume, much of it related to COVID-19. And, you know, we've got physicians who are walking in every day to what is a somewhat frightening situation. And honestly, it's heroic to watch what they're doing. We have people living in their basements because they don't want to take the risk of infecting their families and then turning around and heading back to the hospital the next day. It's absolutely amazing. And then the other story is we have huge parts of the healthcare sector that are shut down. We've got ambulatory surgery centers, dental offices, dermatology offices, almost everything outpatient is shut down. And that means we have doctors whose incomes are interrupted. We have clinics whose normal billings are interrupted. So it's tough on both sides for two very different reasons.
So one of the things we all are concerned about is the health of our healthcare workers, trying to keep them safe. That's why there's so much talk about this PPE, personal protective equipment. What is the situation for your doctors, for your clinicians at this point? To what extent are they, in fact, getting infected by the coronavirus themselves?
We do have a handful of physicians who have tested positive for COVID-19. To date, it is not, those specific situations have not been because of a lack of PPE, but we are worried that the shortage of PPE is going to cause an increase in positive cases of COVID-19 among our clinicians soon if we can't get the situation fixed. There are parts of the country that are really at risk of being out of PPE, in some cases in days, in many cases in a matter of weeks if we can't find more.
Do you have any sense of whether this equipment is on the way? We hear somewhat conflicting stories, frankly.
Yeah, there are two things going on right now. One is everybody is scrambling to find PPE in corners, in back stock rooms, wherever they can. There have been some successes. We typically rely on our hospital partners to provide PPE for our physicians. Right now, of course, we're not going to stand by and just rely on others for that. We're trying to help our hospital partners by searching for it ourselves. We found 1 million N95 masks that we expect to arrive this week, and we'll be pushing out to the field. So you have lots of activity like that going on. The second thing is there are rumors that manufacturing plants in China are back up and running, producing the equipment. And I think the question there is how quickly can we get our hands on it, get it to the U.S., and get it distributed out to the places that need it.
Who sets the protocols for your clinicians in a hospital? I mean, I've heard stories in various places about people being asked to use the N95 mask again, and various things are being done or substitutes for the N95. Who gets to decide? Is it the individual physician? Is it the hospital? Or is it you?
So hospitals typically set the policies on how protective equipment gets used in each of their facilities. Right now, there is a lot of work going on between individual facilities and groups like ours to make sure that those policies are as flexible as possible and as responsible as possible. So we are in deep conversations with many of our partners to make sure that we've got clarity around the best ways to protect our physicians.
There's a great deal of concern, I know you know it, about a shortage of physicians. If this thing really does peak in some areas, like we're in New York City right now, we're one of them, for goodness knows, that we just may not have enough physicians. Is it possible to, forgive the expression, repurpose some of the people that you were describing earlier who can't be doing for example, elective surgery?
The short answer to that question is yes, and indeed you are seeing probably the most significant shortages in New York and northern New Jersey right now. We have received calls from hospitals asking if we can back them up, and we're putting the processes in place to do that. Anesthesiologists, as an example, right now are seeing less demand for their normal service because of the decline in scheduled surgeries, and many of them are well equipped to play backup or support in intensive care units, and we're helping to redeploy those physicians now.
What's the biggest concern you have right now, knowing all that you do, because you really are in a particular position to view this nationwide?
Yeah, there are two big concerns. One is the equipment that we already talked about, the protective equipment. We've got to do everything we possibly can to fix that challenge. And the second one is the general stability of the healthcare industry right now. Again, with half the industry ramped down and with billing operations that are often in India being disrupted because of India's shutdown, we simply have lots of organizations that are significantly impacted, and if we want to get the right equipment and the right things to our physicians on the front line so that they can take care of our patients, we need to be taking care of the financial challenges that the industry is facing.
How far has Congress gone thus far to address some of those concerns? I know that in their second bill, I think it was, there was a fair amount of money in there for hospitals and to support the medical personnel. Have they gone a fair distance toward addressing your concern?
I think the bill that got announced last night and that we're starting to get details of this morning is a great first step. There's a lot of good things in it. I think there are two things we need to keep in mind. One is we need to move as rapidly as we can from having a bill to having actual resources in the hands of our doctors on the front lines. And number two is we need to start preparing for the fact that there's likely going to need to be a need for more in another bill.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Jim. I really appreciate it. That's Envision Healthcare CEO Jim Reckton. And coming up here, we're going to talk with a physician who is also a member of the United States Senate. He is Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, and he called early on for appropriations to try to help fight the coronavirus. We'll find out what he thinks about how we're doing at the present time. That's coming up next on Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
Coronavirus is affecting us all. During this difficult time, we're helping critical workers to make essential journeys by public transport. So, from Monday the 23rd of March, TfL will be operating a gradually reduced service on our network. Some stations will be closed so that we can keep key stations open. Night tube and night overground services have already stopped running, but our extensive night bus service will continue. The Waterloo and City line is now closed. We will keep you updated as our services change. Search TfL.
Mayday, Mayday, this is Red Dwarf. Our engines are dead and we're being sucked into a black hole. Can anyone hear me? Over?
The only thing that's over is us, Crichton. We're finished.
Guys, relax. I've got smart breakdown with the AA. It sends them your vehicle's fault data, so they should know what's wrong before they even get here.
I don't believe it.
What, that they'll already know what's wrong?
No, that you're actually capable of something useful.
The future of breakdown today. The AA. Drive smart. See theaa.com for details.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Apply by the 31st of March for a chance to win your first year in halls. Visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all higher across the board right now. U.S. equities holding on to gains. Fast-moving markets on this Wednesday. Stay with Bloomberg. Keep it locked into Bloomberg for the latest. Right now, we've got the S&P up 35. That's a gain of 1.4%. The Dow surging 600. 63 points, up 3.2%, and NASDAQ up by 34 points. That is a gain of 0.4%. Your 10-year up 13/30 seconds with a yield of 0.80%. Bottom line, stocks looking to post their first back-to-back gains since the coronavirus crisis began, as investors await details on unprecedented government spending packages aimed at countering the hit from the pandemic. S&P 500 index rose after fluctuating between gains and losses early in the session. Gold is lower now by 1.3%, $16.10 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude oil down 0.5% right now, $23.91 a barrel. Recapping equities higher across the board. S&P up 35, a gain there of 1.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues, and once again, here's David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. From the Interactive Brokers Studio, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. The U.S. government is trying to come to grips with a two-pronged crisis: the public health crisis that is the coronavirus, and the economic crisis that it's brought about. We welcome now a lawmaker who is also a physician. Bill Cassidy is a gastroenterologist who serves as a Republican senator from Louisiana. He sits on the Senate Finance Committee as well as its Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, and he joins us now. Thank you, Senator, for joining us. I said a little earlier, you were early on. I saw something about February 25 in the Louisiana papers saying we needed to get off our, we had to get off the dime, let me put it that way, and get some money appropriated to fight this coronavirus. Did you get what you wanted back then?
Yes. Simple answer, yes. And there's several sectors, but we also have to, your point, we have to address both the health aspect and the economic aspect of it. I think we've gotten the money out there for the families, for the businesses, for the communities. I think we also then need to speak about next phase. There should be a next phase in which we recognize that working families have been going to be particularly hurt by this economic downturn. Perhaps a large infrastructure package. That infrastructure package borrowing money at record low rates that could then go into construction, which would then drive demand for manufacturing, which would then stimulate the service industry. So we have to address the economic issue for the family, address the health issue for us all, and then think longer term about how do we continue to have an economic engine that pulls us out of this.
How do you think, Senator, about that balance between, on the one hand, trying to save the economy, essentially, by getting people back to work? That's on the one hand. On the other hand, addressing the health crisis, not letting people go back too fast and making it worse. We're seeing it debated right now. President Trump has indicated maybe by Easter he'd like to get the economy started up again. Where do you come down as a physician?
I think that events will dictate what we do in terms of opening the economy. If we still have emergency rooms overflowing and people with heart attacks not able to get into an ICU bed because they're all filled with COVID-19 patients, it's going to be difficult to open that economy. But we do have to have a strategy. So the strategy that I'm advocating is that we know the best understanding is of what's happened in China is that if somebody has been exposed, they will be immune for maybe a year from the virus. If we can keep track of who is actually exposed and therefore most likely immune, then we know who can safely re-enter the economy. So the nurse or the nurse's aide, the ward clerk in the nursing home, who we know has been exposed, we have that documented that she is now immune, then she can return to work. We don't have to fear that she will infect others or that she will take the infection out. That will lower the demand for personal protective equipment. That will allow them to return to shops. Now, then there's still going to be a whole group that we know are very vulnerable, and we have to have a separate plan of how do we continue to isolate them. But we do need to know who's immune, who's not, so we can have a strategy of those who can safely re-enter the economy and kind of rebuild. In the meantime, we work on the vaccination that will allow immunity to persist for all once it's developed.
So I'm not even close to being an expert in healthcare or public health issues, but as you describe that, it sounds like it makes good sense, but doesn't it require an enormous amount of testing to know who has actually been exposed and who hasn't? Are we capable of doing that right now?
Well, we're not capable of doing now, and it will take a different sort of test, not just the RNA test that people are getting now to establish they've been infected, but also another sort of test that will show what if somebody's been infected and we didn't get the RNA, the nose swab, at the time they were infected. Those are called antibody tests. The South Koreans had an antibody test, but it doesn't appear to be sufficiently sensitive. But we're putting lots of money into the NIH to try and discover that antibody test. that we can then use to kind of retrospectively establish who is protected.
Again, as someone who's not an expert at all, doesn't pretend to be, that makes good sense. But that doesn't sound like you can get that done by Easter. That's just like 3 weeks from now, right?
So what happens by Easter is clearly going to be community dependent. If you're in the midst of a public health crisis, I think it's going to be difficult to reopen your economy by Easter. If, on the other hand, there's a sense of folks who are on the ground that we actually have this contained, that something is working well here, then there can be a different sort of approach. You've seen that in China. Clearly, Wuhan province has a different set of restrictions than does Guangzhou. And so I think the Chinese, that we've learned a lot from, give us that perspective. And I think that's, again, as I said earlier, how that is interpreted will guide what we do economically.
It looks, and we don't want to declare victory too soon, it looks like China may be starting to come out the back end of this thing. On the other hand, Italy is clearly not. How do we avoid being Italy?
We avoid being Italy by individual responsibility. Obey your governor, your mayor, the president. Try and socially distance. If you must go out, then attempt to be, again, socially distant. When you see senators voting on the Senate floor, we'll walk up, we'll vote, we'll walk away, one at a time, not congregating. If every person who might be infected does not infect the 2 to 3 others, that statistically they're going to, if they just go to the grocery store and rub shoulders with people, we are going to have a faster resolution than if people act like it's no big deal. I saw somebody had a coronavirus party, but it turns out one of the people who attended was infected. Now, they would theoretically have infected the other 19 people there, who then go out and infect 2 to 3 other people, and you have that exponential rise. It comes down to individual responsibility.
So you mentioned earlier maybe another phase of stimulus. We all believe, and maybe are confident, that we will come out of this at some point. We're not sure exactly when or how. We will come out of it. And then it's a question of what do we have left when we come out of it. You mentioned infrastructure. What else would that stimulus bill include, and how big are you talking about? Do you have a sense?
Well, so obviously this is a subject of conversation, but I've noticed on a bipartisan, bicameral basis there's been interest in this. My ideas would make it a Trumpian number, make it $1 trillion, make it $200 billion every year over the next 5 or 160 over the next 8 or whatever that would be. Not the shovel-ready project that was under the Obama plan, which I think led to a lot of stranded projects and wasted effort, but something that could be part of a coherent plan that not only puts people to work, but begins to resolve those structural inefficiencies related to inadequate infrastructure that we currently have. Something that will add to GDP in the future as well as to the GDP now. Now, all that has to be kind of sorted out, but we can borrow money at record low interest rates. So if you're going to do it, now seems the time to do so.
And it is something that there was some sort of bipartisan agreement on before. I mean, President Trump was talking about $1 trillion or something like that on infrastructure. Democrats wanted to do something. The question was how we pay for it. Are we not as worried anymore about how we pay for all this money we're borrowing?
Well, of course, we must be worried. On the other hand, if we go into a prolonged recession, that's going to hammer both our economy but also our tax receipts, number one. Number two, being able to borrow money at record low interest rates does a heck of a lot for decreasing the long-term cost of it. And so in some countries, obviously, they have negative interest rates. Other countries, they have close to zero. We'll see where we end up, but we may end up close to zero. If you can borrow close to zero, one, you want to refinance as much of your current debt as you can, but also that would be the time to do something for infrastructure. I would also personally like to see some sort of infrastructure bank established, mainly to segregate the money that is purchased, that is borrowed, so that we know it goes for infrastructure. Mm-hmm. It's going to be easier to have transparency, and if you do that, then we truly get the bang for the buck.
Okay, thank you so much, Senator. Really appreciate your time today. That's Senator Bill Cassidy of the state of Louisiana. Coming up, we're going to take a look at the markets with Bloomberg's Bildana Heydrich. As I now see, the S&P is back up almost 2% after it's been whipsawing all day long. We'll go over that next. This is Balance of Power, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Life. It's a funny old game, isn't it? 1 minute you're on top, the next, you need all the help you can get. So make sure you're there for those around you. Don't just be a spectator. Be a supporter. Bleed for life. Join us at blood.co.uk.
It's Tune In Sports on this day, March 25th, 1972. UCLA men's basketball wins its 6th consecutive national basketball title.
UCLA has won its 6th consecutive NCAA basketball championship, and pandemonium reigns as delirious UCLA players are congratulated by their Florida State rivals as well as their fans.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, click on sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we're taking a deep look at the way the coronavirus pandemic has rippled through every aspect of our lives, seemingly in a matter of days and weeks. Whether you're working from home, not working, or have to go to work, COVID-19 has changed everything. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
This is Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
It's time now for a review of the markets. They have been going all over the place today, but right now, as I look at my screen, we have the S&P up over 2% and the Dow Jones up about 3.7%. I want to go through the markets now with Bloomberg cross-asset reporter Vildana Heydrich. Vildana, thanks for joining us. What is going on with the markets? Because they have been up and down today.
They've been up and down for weeks now, really.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, but it's sort of a relief for a lot of investors today. And by some estimates, you can even say that today is a mild day compared to what we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks. And yesterday we had the Dow Jones surging 11%, for instance, so 2%. It feels good for a lot of investors, but in some ways you can say it's mild. But investors really are just looking forward to more details from Washington in terms of what we can see from the $2 trillion fiscal package, and just really awaiting those details. And that's why we're seeing markets slightly up today.
Yeah, I see that Senate is now convened. Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, has been talking, so they are working on it, and they appear to be working towards something that the president could sign in the near future. So that's the equity market. They're looking for some hope out of Washington, I guess. What about the bond market?
Yeah, with the bond market, same thing. I mean, investors really are just trying to parse all of the information that they can possibly be getting in terms of the fiscal package, because this really is the one thing that a lot of people have been saying is the one thing that's missing. We saw so much coming out of the Fed over the last couple of weeks. Now we're waiting for the political response. We saw treasuries actually advancing today, but awaiting just those details from Washington is what a lot of people are looking forward to.
Well, that's one of the things that I was curious about, because the treasuries, as you say, are advancing. People are buying treasuries at a time when normally if you're going to equities, you don't go to bonds. But also, the one thing we know for sure is there's going to be a lot more issuance coming down the pike with like $2 trillion. It's got to come from somewhere.
Right, and so in terms of that discrepancy between the two, what investors are telling me is there really has been, and you can say this basically for any day over the last couple of weeks, there's been this shifting between panic and optimism. We've seen policy evolving over the last couple of days, but looking forward, there's still so much uncertainty. Investors are really bracing themselves for potentially really dire economic data that's to come. First, tomorrow morning, in terms of what we're going to get from unemployment claims, and it's the magnitude of potentially how bad some of that data might be that's still scaring people. And we heard, for example, from James Bullard, who said he's expecting jobless claims to really surge.
Yeah, it gets your attention, no question about it. Thank you so much to Bloomberg's Vildana Heydrich. Coming up, we talk with former Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz about the collapse of the oil market and what the coronavirus crisis could mean for the future of the energy sector. That's coming up on Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute,
Stocks may do today what they've been unable to accomplish since the coronavirus outbreak began, and that's post gains 2 days in a row. Right now, stocks are mostly higher as investors await more details on the government's $2 trillion spending plan. The Dow is up 640 points, or 3%. S&P up 1%. Sales at retailer Target rose by 20% this month. But several retailers and restaurant chains are telling their landlords they need rent relief until the coronavirus pandemic passes. And as thousands of Americans lose their jobs, state-run unemployment systems are buckling under the stress. National jobless claims rose 33% to 281,000 last week. But according to S&P Global Ratings, tomorrow's weekly jobless figures could be as high as 3 million. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, the oil industry is one of those particularly hard hit by the crisis. Former Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz is here to explain what this could mean over the long term. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
Thank you very much. And here's what's going on. David Weston on this Wednesday here. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all surging by 1% or better. We've got Boeing shares rallying 30% on stimulus hopes. Boeing certainly lifting the Dow today with the Dow Jones Industrial Average surging 825 points. It is higher now by 4%. S&P 500 index up 57. That is a gain of 2.4%. NASDAQ up by 85 for the NASDAQ Composite Index. That is a gain right now of 1.1%. Bottom line here, stocks looking to post their first back-to-back gains since the coronavirus began as investors await details on unprecedented government spending packages aimed at countering the hit from the pandemic. Treasuries are advancing. We've got the 10-year up 12.30 seconds, yield now 0.80%. Gold higher by 1%, 16.15 the ounce. Crude oil swinging between gains and losses, but West Texas Intermediate crude up now by 0.3%, 24 4:07 on WTI. We will have more on the oil story for you, more on the energy story coming up in just a moment right here on Balance of Power. Brent, by the way, lower by 1.2% at $26.82 a barrel. So again, recapping here, S&P 500 index pushing higher up now by 53 points. That is a gain of 2.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks so much, Charlie Pellet. Let's pick up where we left off, which is about oil, crude oil. Oil was hit hard from the demand shock from the pandemic, and then Russia and Saudi Arabia decided they wanted to have a price war. What's the proper U.S. government response, and what does the drama around oil say about the long-term future for energy supply? We welcome now Ernest Moniz, who served as Secretary of Energy under President Obama. He now heads the Energy Futures Initiative as well as the Nuclear Threat Initiative. So, Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for coming back on our radio hour here. Give us your take on what's going on with Russia and Saudi Arabia. Why are they doing this? Is it likely to be prolonged? Is it really aimed at our shale producer right here in the United States?
Well, I think the issue of the shale production is certainly one of the major drivers for them. As you know, it's been quite remarkable, the increase in our production to over 13 million barrels a day, decisively leading the world in terms of production. So I think the Russians and the Saudis also realize that many of the shale producers have a big debt overhang and may not be able to really resist this price pressure. On the other hand, I would just note, I don't know how it will turn out, but I will note that this play has been run before, and it did not work out very well. The shale producers got much more productive, much more efficient, and were able, in fact, to ride out the last drop in oil prices. But of course, this is quite extreme, getting down into the $20 range for West Texas, and probably we will see some casualties and or consolidation.
Yeah, really good point that it was tried before and it didn't work before. Give us a sense of what U.S. energy policy is right now before we get to what it should be. What is it? President Trump historically has liked low oil prices. He likes low gas prices. And then he said, well, if it got bad enough, he might intervene. And then he said he was going to buy for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, I guess, to support the price of oil. What is U.S. policy as far as you understand it?
Well, I'm not sure there's a very rich discussion about U.S. policy, frankly. I think it is interesting, in fact, to look at the truth, the ground truth. The energy sector is clearly undergoing a major transition towards low carbon. Many of us think the pace needs to pick up, but the direction is very, very clear. And so what we are seeing, you may know that at the Energy Futures Initiative, together with the National Association of State Energy Offices, we published this week our fifth Energy Jobs Report. And what we found was that the energy sector, in undergoing this transition, is creating jobs at roughly twice the rate of other parts of the economy, and that's being driven largely by things like energy efficiency, 400,000 jobs over the last 5 years, by electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid vehicles, together up to 130,000 jobs, and the like. So I think this story also needs to be integrated into this energy transition that's going on, and I think the oil and gas industry, especially the oil industry, is going to have a very challenging time in terms of their relationship to investors.
Okay, thank you so very much to Secretary Ernest Moniz. We're going to cut him off a little bit because we have a press conference going on right now live in Boston. But it's very great to have Secretary Moniz with us. In the meantime, let's go now up to Boston to Mayor Marty Walsh from Boston, who is holding a news conference.
To test our resolve, and Boston certainly has what it takes. Over the last couple of weeks, we've taken time to shut our schools and libraries and cancel events. That's why non-essential industries are physically closed. That's why I ordered construction to pause, and it will remain paused until the city of Boston restarts it. We will be releasing some guidelines when work does return on what will be expected in the city of Boston as far as construction guidelines. That's why yesterday the governor issued a stay-at-home advisory. Everyone who can stay at home, we're asking you to stay at home. You should stay there, except to go out and pick up essential items, or maybe take a walk for mental health break to be able to get some air outside of your house. We're asking people to continue to stay 6 feet away, practice social, physical distancing. We're asking people to continue to wash your hands and sanitize your hands throughout the day with soap and warm water, or use hand sanitizer. We're asking you to keep all surfaces clean and disinfected. That means doorknobs in your car. If you go out in your car knobs, and making sure that as you go out, if you can wear gloves, just because we want to keep you safe. We know that this isn't easy, particularly physical distancing is very hard, and the economic impacts are hard, but it's an all-hands-on-deck approach. And we're going to continue to support the people of Boston and the businesses of Boston, and we're going to continue to support each other through these very difficult times. We are working around the clock to help the most vulnerable, our seniors, our low-income families, our homeless population, our kids, all of our neighbors. That's why we hired the McChrystal Group to work to analyze our plans and strengthen our protocols. I spoke to General McChrystal yesterday, and we're getting input every single day and seeing what we've done and the plans we've put in place and how do we continue to move forward. We're preparing for whatever it takes, and I have some updates today on some of our responses. The Boston Resiliency Fund has surpassed its initial $20 million target in a little over a week of fundraising. We're still accepting donation, and that's an incredible testament to our community. We're already using these funds to buy thousands of Chromebooks. We now have over 18,000 of those laptops in our students' hands, and we continue to distribute those laptops to our kids in Boston. We are releasing $5 million in grants to the following organizations that serve very vital needs. They include senior and low-income food providers. The Greater Boston Food Bank, that supplies and supports food pantries across the region. Ethos, which delivers Meals on Wheels to 8,000 seniors. This will allow it to serve more people. Fresh Truck, which will work with partners to deliver fresh produce and household needs. Community Servings, that provides healthy meals to critically ill people and their families. Project Bread, their food source hotline, is a statewide resource for people looking for food resources, and the demand is extremely high. The grants and funds are also supporting healthcare for vulnerable populations. Boston's Healthcare for the Homeless is screening and testing and operating its new medical tents that we created next to our shelters. The Boston Medical Center will use the grants to care for patients, support staff, and sustain safe hospital operations. And Pine Street Inn will increase cleaning of their facilities and work with the Boston Public Health Commission to staff quarantine sites for the homeless. I want to take a minute to thank the steering committee and all the donors. We're going to keep the fund growing, and 100% of the money will continue to serve these kinds of needs. For more information on donating or applying for funds, please visit boston.gov/coronavirus. And to be clear, if you're applying for this money is going to meet the needs that are assessed right now today in combating the coronavirus. For our small businesses, yesterday I signed an order lifting the City of Boston's ban on plastic bags during this emergency. Right now, we're allowing and helping restaurants and essential stores to provide takeouts and deliveries, and we worked with the state on passing legislation up there to lift the beer and wine restrictions, as allowing people when they order takeout to have that option. That is not passed legislation yet, but I want to thank the legislators who are working on that. Our businesses need flexibility right now to serve their customers. So restaurants, pharmacies, and other essential stores can offer paper and plastic bags, no charge to customers. So we're going to do everything we can in the immediate right now to help our businesses to be successful and to keep them open. And we're going to continue to working with them. We're also working on a range of additional supports for our local businesses. I want to remind everyone, you can find directories of open restaurant and businesses at boston.gov/coronavirus in the local resource section. I encourage businesses to sign up, and I ask residents, if you're looking to get food delivery to your house, make those calls, go on that guide. These are businesses that need the help, and if you're going to do takeout, you could look around the city to see what's available. I'm also asking people to check our guidebook for businesses to see how they can use delivery services for workers to get hired in food delivery right now. So we're working to connect opportunities with these businesses as well. For our students that I already mentioned, we have over 18,000 Chromebooks in the hands of students. We have over 70 meal sites continue to operate across our city. I've heard from BPS that some of our immigrant families are concerned about going out under the stay-at-home advisory. I want to reassure them that it's safe to visit these sites, and people who are supporting you also want to help you. We continue to get amazing support from volunteers and community members. One of our nonprofit partners that has stepped up in a big way is Katie's Closet. They've supplied 500 toiletry packages to each of our 16 BPS emergency meal sites. That includes feminine products we provide free in school for girls and young women. We're also working to continue the wraparound care that our schools provide. For medical personnel, I want to just start by saying a huge debt of gratitude and thank you for the incredible and difficult work that you're doing every single day, and to your families for supporting all of us. The same goes for our first responders, our Boston Police, Boston Fire, and Boston EMS, the custodial staff that keeps our buildings clean and safe, the grocers and pharmacy workers, the transportation and public work employees. I want to thank everyone on the front lines of this crisis. It's never been more clear in our lives that we live with heroes all around us here in Boston, and quite honestly, I can expand that to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts too. So thank you all the first responders throughout the Commonwealth. Transportation supports are in effect for hospital workers. We have discounted rates in commercial parking garages. The garages are listed on our website, so you can get the access code from your hospital for your work, or you can contact your hospital as well. Blue Bikes we've made free monthly passes for hospital staff. We're reopening stations that were closed for the winter, and the bikes are being disinfected regularly. But I still ask you, if you take a Blue Bike, my suggestion is you wear a pair of gloves when you're riding it. Even though we're cleaning them, you just don't know to be safe. And starting today, the MBTA is adjusting commuter rail schedules to get more trains into Boston for the 7 a.m. shift. For emergency workers with young children, we now have 27 emergency child care centers operating in the city of Boston. They are for workers in healthcare, public safety, and essential industries. You can find them listed at boston.gov/coronavirus. Some updates on getting trusted information, and this is probably the best way to get your information, other than, as I said yesterday, watching it on the news or getting it from one of our papers. You can we have text message alerts going out daily in 6 different languages. That number is 99411, and text the message Boss COVID. The word Boss COVID, text it to 99411. You can also find codes to receive messages in other languages. We have information on 10 languages available on boston.gov/coronavirus. Let me be very clear. I kind of said that too quickly. We have 6 languages on our text messages, and we have 10...
We've been listening to the mayor of Boston. He is Marty Walsh, explain exactly how the city of Boston is coming to terms with this coronavirus crisis, essentially slotting in under the governor of Massachusetts, from whom we heard yesterday, saying people should be staying at home if at all possible, also indicating some of the support they're giving to various people, including buying laptops for some of the children in the city to help them with their education. So that has been Marty Walsh, the Boston mayor. And now we go to Charlie Pellet for a Biz Flash.
Hi, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. David Weston, stocks are surging. Stocks looking to post their first back-to-back gain since the coronavirus crisis began. Investors, meanwhile, awaiting details on unprecedented government spending packages aimed at countering the hit from the pandemic. Stay with Bloomberg Radio for the very latest. Anything we get from Washington, we will have it for you instantly here on Bloomberg Radio. Equity market update. Here's where we stand. S&P up now by 74 at 25.21. That is a gain of 3%. The Dow now rallying by 1,004 points, higher by 4.9%, building on yesterday's surge. NASDAQ up 111 points for the NASDAQ Composite Index. That is a gain right now of 1.5%. 10-years up 430 seconds. The yield on the 10-year now 0.83%. Crude oil, an ongoing story today. West Texas Intermediate now up 1.8%. 24.45 a barrel on WTI. Brent crude down 0.3%, 27.08 a barrel. Boeing certainly helping the Dow move higher today. Stimulus hopes for Boeing. Shares up now on shares of BA up by 32.5%. Recapping equities rally with the S&P up 79, up 3.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. David?
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. Live from the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. The Sloan School of Business at MIT has assembled a group of experts to advise on how we can fight the coronavirus. Professor Simon Johnson is co-chair of that group, and we welcome him now to Bloomberg. So, Professor, thanks so much for joining us. I'll start out with one of the reports I saw that came out of your alliance is basically using data analytics tools to identify particularly vulnerable groups, whether it be at nursing homes or particular counties, and really take a different approach. Explain what you discovered.
Well, the key point, David, is that in this phase right now, which I've described as a surge, and it's really very dangerous, but also subsequent to that, you need to protect the hospitals. You need to keep them online. You need to have them available for COVID-19 patients and for everybody else. By the way, that's critically important. But the best way to do that includes identifying and protecting through a shelter-in-place policy with proper resupply, I would emphasize, food, medicine, and telehealth, every single at-risk person in your community, which is, of course, the older groups and also people with underlying health conditions such as diabetes, obesity, and hypertension. I think that this is a difficult task. I know there are people around the country, and we're working with them at the local and state level, who are quite focused on this. And I am optimistic they are going to make some progress, and we're in the business of providing them with actionable intelligence and operational recommendations, really focused on that goal right now.
Well, that's the issue is really the actionable intelligence, because it feels like increasingly we're going to have to get more sophisticated in exactly how we direct our efforts. We can't shut everything down everywhere. We have to be much more selective, a form of triage, if you will, about exactly where we expend our efforts. But at the same time, what sort of political problems does that raise?
That's a very good question. Look, I think in the short term, and we're working this, hours, in a situation right now, hours matter, and then, of course, the days. I would say that a lot of political obstacles that previously existed for many years in this country have melted away. The people we're working with, I've lost track of which ones are Republicans and which ones are Democrats. There are people who get it and people who are really focused, and that includes some of the leadership in Massachusetts, including Mayor Walsh, we just heard from on your show. They are focused and they understand what's coming. But we'll work with everyone. And I think a lot of people around the country are about to see things that will wake them up to the very real threats here. And I think it's important to understand there are solutions, and there are places in Italy, even in some of the most difficult areas of Lombardy, that withstood the surge of infection and hospitalization there. And actually, some of them have got through that to a place where they have zero infection. So there are strategies available. There is intelligence that can be generated. The good news is the private sector, I think, is risen up in a remarkable fashion with convergent strategies. So we have, for example, in our tools coming online soon, real-time data from various sources that will be fed into COVID-19 command centers on an advisory basis. We are not the decision makers. That is the heroes who stand on the front lines, and we are providing them with advice. We're providing them with intelligence. It will be all actionable in real time. That's the goal: to track the infections, to understand what is needed through the triage systems. Again, we don't set the clinical guidelines. That's set by the states and the clinicians. But we are running information systems and building systems of support that will enable them to see the data, visualize the data, understand the data, and make their own decision. They can follow our advice or not. Obviously, that's why they are such important people in our society right now. And I have every confidence that these people will lead us out of it, and we're just trying to help them.
Well, it's interesting to me, and I must say vaguely encouraging, that we are getting reliable data, as I assume we must be, out of Italy, and for that matter, Spain and other places now, because obviously these people are in true crisis, but we're getting enough data so that you may be able to take a look at it and apply your rigorous system and learn some things?
Look, it's certainly the case that there's a lot of transparency coming out of these places, and we have learned a lot, and I would just emphasize it's dynamic, and we continue to learn, everyone who's working this, and we continue to share. The quality of information, this is an important point in the U.S., is still weak. It will improve as more testing comes online. It will improve as telehealth comes online and becomes available to everyone, so people start to report their symptoms, and that will be important information. But it is very important for people to understand that they must listen to their local officials like Mayor Walsh, who fully have... Mayor Walsh and Governor Baker, I can assure you, have fully grasped the severity of the current situation. And so the guidance that they provide is absolutely critical. And we are never going to second-guess those people, I can assure you, because they're on the spot and they understand that with the very weak real-time data that's available right now, because the testing is so limited,
it is important to be extremely careful and listen to your local officials, and they have your best interest at heart. I'm confident, and I believe, and I hope, across the country.
So give us a sense, in closing here, should we expect regular sort of updates or reports from the COVID-19 Policy Alliance? Is this the first of several reports we'll get, just informing us what's going on?
Yes, absolutely. Look, our goal is to provide as much information to as many people as possible. There are, clearly decision makers need some of this information urgently, and we're very focused on that. But at the same time, our goal is to increase the level of information and awareness more broadly. So if people can go to covidalliance.com, look at what we have there, feel free to send us comments, suggestions, ideas, or link us up with other data feeds. So we are completely non-profit, and we are entirely focused on COVID-19, and we'll only ever be focused on COVID-19. And as a result, we can share data, we can merge data, we can put data into dashboards for COVID-19 command centers, basically as soon as we can get that organized. And we have a lot of technical people in and around MIT, but actually more broadly involved in our effort. So people already, I would say the good news is there are convergent efforts across many parts of the private sector that are reinforcing and backing up these heroes in local government and state government, and we stand with them. And anything that we can do, and any ideas, and anybody in those communities who would like us to help them, please just contact us.
Which must be encouraging to all of us. Thank you so much, Professor Simon Johnson of MIT Sloan School of Business. Now we want to talk about possible treatments for the coronavirus. We've heard President Trump several times talk about chloroquine and the hopes that he has for the chloroquine. Well, it may have had some unintended consequences, as Max Neeson, who writes for Bloomberg Opinion on biotech and pharma and healthcare, has written about today, and he joins us now. So, Max, let us know. Maybe we got ahead of ourselves here a little bit.
I do think that that's the case. The evidence that this drug is effective in COVID-19 is quite limited and also somewhat contradictory. So it's a little bit early for the president to come on and give it such prominence to imply that it is or should be widely available right now. You have one French trial where it looked good, but another Chinese trial in mild patients where it had little effect. And then the kind of consequences of being so public about it. A man unfortunately drank a product meant for aquarium usage that contained chloroquine and died. The drug is also used for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, reporting of shortages for that. And when you have it, such a public role, so many people seeking it, it makes it harder to actually study it.
So whether premature or not, there are reports, there was one in the New York Times today, that actually some people are now just starting to hoard it, actually go out there and make sure they have a lot of it, which can't be constructive. Absolutely not. It shouldn't be used outside of without the direct advice of a physician, because there are forms of it that are dangerous if used improperly. So that's one potential issue. And also, again, those other things I mentioned, that whatever we have is needed for this sort of compassionate use for very severe patients, which is the one setting in which you should be using potentially an unproven drug. And it's all to the detriment of efforts to combat the virus. So, Max, clear one thing up for me that actually I think was a confusion between the president and actually the CDC in a news conference, and that is, can they do the clinical trials they need to and do them fast? Because it wasn't quite clear to me how fast can we do it. We both have chloroquine, but we also have the Gilead Science drug remdesivir, which President Trump talked about as well. Can we speed up the process and still have it be reliable? So there's only so much you can speed up science. You have to administer the drug to the right kind of patients. You have to randomize them. You have to collect the data and analyze it. There are some things that you can do. There's something called an adaptive trial. This is sort of a newer type of clinical trial that you make plans in advance to make changes based on the data that comes in. You learn from the trial in the middle of it and change it in the middle of it, as opposed to setting a set of guidelines and then waiting all the way through. That's one potential avenue. The World Health Organization is running one such trial designed to be as simple and quick as possible. So there are things you can do, but you can just by wishing speed it up. We're still going to need to wait for good data. Well, and that's the question. Wait how long? I mean, understanding you can't speed it up too much. What's the normal pattern here that we would actually be able to know whether some combination of drugs here could be effective in treatment? So the earliest that I think we'll have
data that you might be able to make a regulatory decision on are from the Chinese trials of remdesivir, that Gilead drug. They've been running those for a while. We should get some data sometime in April. Now, ordinarily, that might not be enough for the FDA to move forward. They tend to want, U.S. trials, different populations, different standards for data. But, this is a special circumstance. So data that comes from anywhere, I think the FDA has already said they're willing to consider that. So you may have a speedier regulatory timeline and greater flexibility than in the past.
Well, so that's somewhat encouraging. That's not like the 18 months we're talking about for a vaccine.
No, exactly. So that's the benefit of trying these older established medicines, things that already exist. They may not work as well, but they may work and we'll have them sooner.
Okay, Max Neeson of Bloomberg Opinion. Thank you so much, Max, for being with us. That's going to do it for the first hour of Balance of Power. I'm David Weston, but I get to turn it over now to Lisa Abramowitz, which is my great privilege for the second hour of Balance of Power. And this is Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuit's look at luxury. While the fashion industry has a long history of providing to worthy causes such as AIDS relief, it's usually via galas and donations. Now it's in their factories. Luxury fashion conglomerate Kering said it would switch to producing surgical masks at the French workshops of its Balenciaga and Saint Laurent brands as the country ramps up its efforts to contain the coronavirus. Luxury giant LVMH has switched to producing sanitizing hand gels in factories that normally make its Christian Dior and Givenchy cosmetics and perfumes. Airbus bought 2 million masks from Europe to China, and Gucci, Kering's largest brand, is seeking approval from health authorities in Italy to produce more than 1 million surgical masks. In the U.S., zoning circles and hobbyists are joining the call to help. New York fashion designer Christian Siriano showed mask prototypes on Instagram, while in a World War II-like manufacturing push, the American Apparel and Footwear Association said some members' production lines are being converted now. Amanda O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
With a medical crisis, can any other central bank execute?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, do things break?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ surging on this Wednesday. Stocks looking to post their first back-to-back gains since the coronavirus crisis began. Investors, though, are awaiting details on unprecedented government spending packages aimed at countering the hit from the pandemic. As soon as we get details, we'll have those for you. Keep it locked into Bloomberg Radio throughout the day. And, of course, got to stay with us right through the close and find out how Asian markets react tonight. Here's where we stand right now in terms of the numbers. We've got the S&P up 69. That is a gain of 2.8%. The Dow up 903 points, higher by 4.4%. NASDAQ up 95. For NASDAQ, that is a gain of 1.3%. 10 years up 930 seconds. The yield 0.81%. Gold is down 1.1% right now at $16.14 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up today by 1.7%, higher now at $24.42 a barrel. And with more on the commodities picture, here's Bloomberg's Renita Young.
Crude oil futures are trading on both sides as a collapse in demand and the Saudi-Russia oil price war continues, and most recently, the United States gets involved. Gold trades lower today as a glitch appears in the global market. The price of gold in New York and London has diverged by the most in 4 decades after lockdowns and grounded planes strangled the supply routes that allow physical gold to move around the globe. And in other commodities news, copper is swinging between gains and losses, and the Bloomberg Commodity Index is off its lows of the day. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
Boeing shares rallying, lifting the price-weighted Dow Jones Industrial Average for a second day. Boeing, look at this quote here. Boeing shares surging now by 30.5%. Boeing is now at 166.73. After earnings, Nike shares surging 12.7%. And Target has dumped the full-year sales and profit forecast it gave just 3 weeks ago, even as sales in March have soared, underscoring the difficulty retailers face in navigating the unfolding coronavirus crisis. It is 1:02 on Wall Street. That means it's time now for the Market Drivers Report. And here is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are rising more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is up 5%, and the S&P 500 is higher by 2.9%. The ADR index is climbing for a second day after a 10% advance yesterday. It's headed for its biggest 2-day gain since at least November 2008. Norway's Equinor has climbed about 12% in U.S. trading. The energy producer halted U.S. shale operations as part of a plan to reduce costs by $3 billion in response to the coronavirus. Equinor also suspended stock buybacks. Other energy ADRs are also higher, along with the price of Brent crude, an international benchmark. The UK's BP has risen more than 10%, and Royal Dutch Shell's Class A ADRs have gained 8.3%. Brazil's Petrobras has added 7.6%. Another Brazilian company, Embraer, has gained 17%. The regional jet maker says taking all necessary steps to combine its commercial business with Boeing. Yesterday, Reuters reported that a Boeing executive still sees the deal as strategically important. Now, China's Beijing has fallen 4.9%. The drug maker said Chinese regulators suspended imports and use of Bristol-Myers Squibb's breast cancer drug, Abraxane. Beijing distributes the medicine in its home country, Charlie.
All right, we thank you very much. Dave Wilson working at home covering those American depository receipts. He mentioned Boeing, worth repeating. Boeing shares up now by 32.3%. Recapping, Dow up 1,028 points, up 5%. S&P up 80, that is a gain of 3.3%. NASDAQ up 118, up 1.6%. Gold again down 1.1%, $16.14 the ounce. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We need an economy that works for everybody.
I am the one who has the broadest coalition.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
These lawyers brought the case, and in my view, they should be sanctioned.
We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, not broadcasting from the Interactive Broker Studios, but rather from my home, because that is where everybody is these days in New York City. If you are a non-essential worker, or even if you are and can hole away, very much front and center the coronavirus spreading and the concern about whether the government can respond adequately. We are hearing about a $2 trillion plan to support the economy through this period. It probably is the first of a number of installments installments, as you heard Charlie say, giving some steam to markets for a second, possibly straight day for the first time since February 12th, if it holds. Joining us now is somebody who is a perfect cross-section of Main Street and Wall Street, sort of understanding some of the concerns that investors really have at this moment of flux with such massive historic swings in markets globally. Clark Kendall is President and Chief Executive Officer of Kendall Capital. Clark, I really want to get your sense first of the concerns of your clients. How many clients are calling you? How concerned they are about their portfolio, their retirements versus just the day-to-day as basic commerce is sort of getting disrupted on a national and frankly global scale?
We do service what we call the middle-class millionaires in the Washington, D.C. area. They are concerned. The depth and breadth of this drop has been enormous, and it's been so quick. So they are concerned, especially the individuals who plan on retiring in a short period of time, 1 to 2 years.
So what are they doing? Are they not retiring? Are they planning to go into safer assets? How are you advising them?
Well, I think what you do is portfolio manager in the private client world, make sure that we have short-term investment products for short-term needs, and we utilize long-term investment products for long-term needs. The concern is the 60-year-old or 65-year-old who wants to retire. I mean, you still need to invest for 2030, 2040, and 50. You need to still look for the equity markets to meet those long-term financial needs.
So balancing out taking risk at a time of incredible uncertainty and the need to eventually retire if you have any desire to do so, how do you advise somebody who, say, is 55 years old and just watched their 401ks plunge off a cliff? What do you tell them to do?
Well, I think, first of all, you got to look, why did it plunge? I mean, it's plunged because of this black swan, the coronavirus. And you've got to say to yourself, the markets will not recover until we know the depth and duration of this coronavirus. And I think the reason why the markets rallied over the last 2 days is because we are starting to see a glimpse of the end of this. You know, President Trump wants to do it by mid-April. It might very well take much longer than that, but I think we, for the first time, are starting to see an end to this virus.
Well, Clark, there's sort of the virology of it, which is incredibly unclear. And even the scientists who we've spoken to on this program and other programs say that they don't really have a good handle on just how quickly it's spreading outside of New York or even within New York or Washington State and some of the other epicenters within and outside of the United States. But there's also a question about the government response. We are expecting the $2 trillion plan to get passed by the House and go to President Trump to get signed. How important is that type of support to your calculus at this point as far as advising clients to go long equities?
Well, or to stay long equities, as I always like to say. That's right. I think what you need to do is you need to close your eyes and pretend it's 2030 and look backwards to 2020. And what do you do through this type of market correction? You've got the 10-year Treasury at 1% now. So if you buy 10-year Treasuries at 1%, you invest $100, you're going to have 110. What do? You convert IRAs and 401ks to Roth if your income is going to be down, if the value of your retirement accounts are down. You step up and realize tax losses. If for some reason you own Southwest Airlines, you still people will fly again in the future. You realize a tax loss and buy Delta or Alaskan Airlines. So I think there's enormous opportunities. I also point out the Russell 2000 has had the highest level of insider buying over the last 30 days of all time. And there are some great companies where the corporate executives are stepping up and buying their stock in the open market. I think that's a great long-term leading economic indicator.
So are you advising the clients buy Russell 2000?
Stocks within the Russell 2000. We own things like United Rental, Bright House Financial. Bright House Financial, basically is an annuity company. And, the Secure Act of December, now more people can buy annuities, and it's an incentive to sell annuities. And I think through this financial crisis, people are going to want to annuitize their retirement accounts, probably more so than ever before. And it's interesting that the chief financial officers are stepping up and buying their own stock in the open market. And both of those stocks have done extremely well over the last 2 days.
Clark, I'd just love to get a sense of whether any of your clients say to you, forget it, just get me out of equities, I can't handle this.
No, yes, it happens every market correction. People are people. As Warren Buffett, to coin his phrase, be greedy when others are fearful, be fearful when others are greedy. So yes, we do have a few clients, but we've actually had quite a few clients add more money to their accounts.
Clark Kendall, thank you so much for being with us and for your comments. Clark Kendall is President and Chief Executive Officer of Kendall Capital. It's an interesting time, especially for retail investors, especially for people who want to retire at some point in the not so distant future. How do you navigate around some of the worst, most volatile swings we have ever seen in U.S. equities? Coming up, we'll have a conversation in Washington, D.C. With Congressman French Hill, a Republican from Arkansas, about the latest on the bill that is about to be passed. That is what we are hearing. We will get some details. That's coming up next. Stick with it. This is Bloomberg Balance of Power. I am Lisa Abramowitz in for David Weston.
If you promise to cover the latest financial and business news from Asia,
we're talking about social enterprises in Asian countries
with expert analysts who really understand Asia.
Aren't you encouraged with respect to U.S.-China trade?
Then you must be us.
Tell us about the trend within this part of the world.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
What sort of fiscal stimulus do you think we'll see?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
only you can prevent wildfires.
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening. Much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Life. It's a funny old game, isn't it? 1 minute you're on top, the next, you need all the help you can get.
Yeah, later, yeah.
So make sure you're there for those around you. Don't just be a spectator. Be a supporter. Bleed for life. Join us at blood.co.uk.
3 is a magic number. 300 schemes to help bugs and bees, supporting environmental needs. 8,000 grants for local sports, and performing arts get our support. 7 millionaires every week, the nation's on a winning streak. 30 million pounds to good causes every week. Who'd have thought it? These are magic numbers.
Your numbers make amazing happen. The National Lottery.
Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Mayday, Mayday, this is Red Dwarf. Our engines are dead and we're being sucked into a black hole. Can anyone hear me? Over?
The only thing that's over is us, Crichton. We're finished.
Guys, relax. I've got Smart Breakdown with the AA. It sends them your vehicle's fault data, so they should know what's wrong before they even get here.
I don't believe it.
What, that they'll already know what's wrong?
No, that you're actually capable of something useful. The
future of breakdown today. The AA. Drive smart. See theaa.com for details.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Apply by the 31st of March for a chance to win your first year in halls. Visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials. Just like Smart Water's
all new
bottles are made from
100% recycled
plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still
100%
recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
At Asda, you can put all your eggs in one basket. Get 3 Easter eggs for just £8. Like a Cadbury Twirl, Caramel Freddo, or our Asda Free-From White Chocolate Egg. Easter egg faves without shelling out. Asda.
Selected stores online, subject to availability. Eggs £3 each, 115 to 262 grams.
It's Tune In Sports on this day, March 25th, 1972. UCLA men's basketball wins its 6th consecutive national basketball title.
UCLA has won its 6th consecutive NCAA basketball championship, and pandemonium reigns as delirious UCLA players are congratulated by their Florida State rivals as well as their fans.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, click on sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we're taking a deep look at the way the coronavirus pandemic has rippled through every aspect of our lives, seemingly in a matter of days and weeks. Whether you're working from home, not working, or have to go to work, COVID-19 has changed everything. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all rallying, trading at or near their best level of the day. And this Business Flash brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, transforming computing professionals into data scientists to meet demand in this fast-growing field. More at njit.edu/Jersey City. Let's begin with the numbers. Right now, the Dow is up 1,114 points. That is a gain of 5.4%. S&P 500 index up 96 points. That is a gain of just about 4%, while the NASDAQ Composite Index higher now by 2.3%, up by 173 points. NASDAQ at 75.93. Starks on track to post their first back-to-back gains since the coronavirus crisis began, as investors await unprecedented government spending packages aimed at countering the hit from the pandemic. Boeing seen as a major beneficiary, its shares surging right now by 31.5%. We've got the 10-year up 16.30 seconds, the yield on the 10-year 0.79%. Gold retreating down 1.1%, 16.13 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude now up 1.8%, 24.43 a barrel on WTI. Brent 27.28 up by 0.5%. So again, recapping here, equities higher across the board on this Wednesday. S&P up 96, up by 3.9%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. She's working at home like the rest of us at Bloomberg. Back we go once again. Here she is, Lisa Abramowitz.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. This is Bloomberg Balance of Power, and that is correct. I am broadcasting from home in New York City, not from the Bloomberg Interactive Interactive Brokers Studios. All eyes are not on New York, although a lot of focus is on the growing number of coronavirus cases here, but very much in Washington, D.C., whether or not Congress can pass the $2 trillion plan that has been outlined that the Senate and the White House have apparently agreed upon. Joining us now, my great privilege to bring in Congressman French Hill, Republican of Arkansas. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. I want to start with talking about cohesion within Congress, how likely it is that they will simply and quickly sign off on what the Senate is about to vote on. Is that your sense that this will be signed off on in short order?
Well, Lisa, thanks for having me. I think the House is going to do its work today once that final text is released from the Senate. Both House Republicans and House Democrats have extensive conference calls and review processes in place for today. So I think you'll see House members reading that text, going down their checklists, and making sure they understand what the Senate's compromise has turned out to be.
So there's a question here about the urgency and the timing and how the checks really needed to be in the mail, last week, and that the longer that we wait, the more the economic pain will be felt. Do you get the sense that urgency is recognized among yourself and your colleagues?
Boy, we sure had the urgency the last 2 weeks when the House acted promptly to pass the public health appropriations 2 weeks ago and then passed the family support bill weekend before last. When this urgency bogged down, Lisa, was on Saturday when Chuck Schumer threw a curveball to Mitch McConnell and bogged the process down with Nancy Pelosi Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. But fortunately, at midnight last night, we're back on track. I think the House will move expeditiously. I'm just sorry we lost the past 3 days.
Well, and I'm sure that I have heard that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are pointing the finger at the Republicans pointing the finger at the Democrats, and people just trying to race to get something done. There is a question when this does get passed. A lot of people have said it is a first step, that the $1,200 check that Americans, particularly those in lower and middle income homes, are going to receive is only a starting point, and that more aid will be required. Is there any process in place currently to get something done after that, to get additional measures in place quickly to keep that revenue coming?
Well, let's focus on what we've gotten done. We've gotten paid leave organized for families who are home with quarantine or home with kids out of school, 40 million kids out of school. We got extended unemployment benefits up to 4 months with a much higher payout rate for anyone who's already been laid off. They'll have a much more generous unemployment benefit. We've gotten the direct payments that you've talked about, which will go for the next 2 or 3 months, if not a little longer. And then finally, we have this liquidity business interruption lending program for every business, large and small, to try to keep people on the payroll, so they're not laid off and they're not turned to the unemployment insurance program. When you combine that economic preservation strategy plus the public health money, I think we need to look back in about a month and see where we are. But I certainly believe in the short run, which I defined as from the time President Trump signs this bill into law, for the next 60 days to 75 days, I think we've gotten the kind of support for payroll, support for business, and support for public health that ought to get us through this immediate wave of the public health crisis.
We talk about the big numbers and the big picture that are part of the $2 trillion bill. I'm curious about the process, because it's one thing to have this funding available to small, medium-sized businesses. It's another to educate them and get them with the program enough to actually know where to go to apply for these loans and get them in short order. How are sort of the local governments, how are you working with sort of the different constituents within Arkansas to make sure that that information gets out there and that it's processed in a timely manner?
Lisa, it's an outstanding question. We're talking with the Arkansas Bankers Association, our dentists, our small businesses, the NFIB, our chambers of commerce. We're sending out the working documents. And the key thing is for small businesses, including nonprofits, let's include our nonprofits because they're covered by this bill. They need to go to their local bank, and their local bank has delegated authority on these what I call economic preservation business interruption loans. So they'll work with their local bank to have this money distributed around our 50 states.
How concerned are you just about the anecdotal reports, people calling your office about getting laid off and feeling despondent?
Oh, it's terrible. We're estimating up to 77,000 Arkansans may lose their job because of coronavirus. And I was looking at a Goldman survey a couple of days ago that was suggesting there might be 2 million people in the jobless claims number next week. So we're all desperately concerned for that, which is why we're doing the family payment, why we're enhancing unemployment benefits, and why we're getting liquidity funding to our businesses of all sizes so that we can dent this horrible situation that's a result of this unprecedented public health crisis.
Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time. Congressman French Hill, Republican of Arkansas, joining us very much front and center, that $2 trillion plan that is currently going to be voted on in the Senate, then go to the House, then go to President Trump for his sign-off so the checks can get in the mail and people can live to see another day if they have been laid off. I'm Lisa Abramowitz in for David Weston, and this is Bloomberg Balance of Power.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are looking to post their first back-to-back gains since the coronavirus crisis began. The Dow was up 920 points, or 4%. S&P up 3%. The Nasdaq up 1%. Well, as investors and businesses await details on the government spending plan, Bloomberg reports the $2 trillion Senate stimulus package includes $50 billion in grants and loans for airlines. And the Washington Post reports the Senate rescue bill also includes a $17 billion federal loan program for businesses deemed critical to national security. Well, there's some positive economic news out today. Orders for durable goods rose more than forecast in February, ahead of the full impact of the virus. And with the gym mostly off limits, Peloton and other smart bike makers are seeing sales climb. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Coronavirus is affecting us all. During this difficult time, we're helping critical workers to make essential journeys by public transport. So, from Monday the 23rd of March, TfL will be operating a gradually reduced service on our network. Some stations will be closed so that we can keep key stations open. Night Tube and Night Overground services have already stopped running, but our extensive night bus service will continue. The Waterloo and City Line is now closed. We will keep you updated as our services change. Search TfL.
Imagine winning 10 grand.
Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Play Thursday, and you could make every month amazing with Set for Life and the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
First thing you think of when you hear cancer, that's it. It's finished.
All of a sudden your life becomes about appointments and this test and that test. But then you start to just thank God that those tests are there.
Every single day, nearly 1,000 people find out that they've got cancer.
These donations are absolutely crucial for all of the research to help families like us.
Donate right now to Cancer Research UK.
For just £2 a month, you can make a real difference.
Thank you for your donations.
It's Tune In Sports on this day, March 25th, 1972. UCLA men's basketball wins its 6th consecutive national basketball title.
UCLA has won its 6th consecutive NCAA basketball championship, and pandemonium reigns as delirious UCLA players are congratulated by their Florida State rivals as well as their fans.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, click on sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
That saying, success breeds success, it's true.
Are we seeing any improvement?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
How would you describe your outlook?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up over the next half hour, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Nicholas Diamond of Avalere Health. Also, he teaches on the faculty at Georgetown Law. We'll get a sense of just how bad this has gotten. Plus, we'll take a look at the U.S. economy, what we know and what we don't know as we look ahead to the virus's effects. Right now, though, let's get a sense of what's going on with the numbers. Perhaps a second straight day of gains for the first time since February 2nd. Charlie Pellet.
Absolutely right about that, Lisa Bromowitz. That's what we're on the lookout for. Got to stay with Bloomberg, by the way, right through the closing bell to see how things shake out. And, of course, how Asian markets react tonight. And fast-moving markets, I stress, got to keep it locked into Bloomberg Radio for the very latest developments, not just on Wall Street, but, of course, out of Washington. That's what we're all watching today. Right now, we have got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. They are surging up 2.2% or better. NASDAQ, the laggard, I put laggard in quotes here, up 2.2%, up 161 points right now at 75.79. The S&P 500 index surging 3.8% now, up 92 points at 25.39. We have got the Dow Jones Industrial Average up by 1,062, higher by 5.1%. Bottom line, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ close to session highs. The 10-year, the yield there now is 0.79%, up 16.30 seconds. Gold, a retreat today, down 1.2%, 16.13 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude surging 2.5%, $24.62 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. Main Street and Wall Street gearing up for dismal numbers on America's labor market, starting with tomorrow's data on jobless claims. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Efforts to stem the coronavirus have triggered a flood of furloughs, from factories to the neighborhood tavern. We'll be going from half-century lows to record highs. Economists see initial jobless claims running at 1.5 million. The prior week's tally was in the 200,000s. This month's unemployment rate, meantime, is seen ticking closer to 4%. We get that data next week. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Boeing shares driving today's gains in the Dow big time. Boeing said to be a major beneficiary in the stimulus package. Its shares up now by 29.6%. Target, its shares are moving lower. It has dumped its full-year sales and profit forecast. That was the forecast it gave just 3 weeks ago, even as sales in March have soared, underscoring the difficulty retailers face in navigating the unfolding coronavirus crisis. Target shares lower now by 4.4%. Gold again down 1.2%. Recapping the equity numbers, S&P up 96. That is a gain of 3.9%. Latest from the business desk, I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. Here she is once again, Lisa Abramowitz.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. Really all the focus is on the healthcare side of things, on the science, which markets are depending on and trying to get a handle on as quickly as possible. They do not work in the fields, though, although this individual does. Dr. Nicholas Diamond, he is a consultant working in health policy at the firm Avalier Health. He also is on the faculty at Georgetown Law. Dr. Diamond, thank you so much for being with us. When we talk about the intersection of healthcare policy and just healthcare in general in law, I'm curious what you think about President Trump's suggestion that we open up the economy sooner, that basically if we selectively have people who are younger, who do not have pre-existing health conditions, go back to work, that would be a way of restarting the economy without really harming individuals. What do you think of that proposal?
Well, thanks for having me on, Lisa. Generally speaking, I think any of the public health folks would tell you that those types of changes to the current measures in place might be a little bit risky. We still do have case numbers rising quite significantly globally, and also here in the U.S., in particular in states like New York and Louisiana, which suggests that we really still do need some of those stay-at-home type measures in place for the foreseeable future.
How critical have things gotten in New York?
You know, the reports at the moment suggest that things tend to be worsening by the day, which I think really points to the need for some of the measures that we've seen Governor Cuomo very publicly propose, things like increasing the amount of PPE, personal protective equipment, like face masks and respirators that are available to medical personnel on the front lines.
Well, I guess the reason why I ask, I'm here in New York City, and I am watching as pretty much I'm looking out my window right now, and a lot of the restaurants, all of them are closed. Everything has a sort of metal sheet over it, and I'm trying to understand, are we headed toward an Italy-like situation in New York, or is it completely different based on the response, based on the emphasis in getting ventilators and more PPEs, personal protective equipment, to the medical staff here?
Well, yeah, I'm here in D.C., and things are starting to change in that regard, too, with businesses being, non-essential businesses being shut down. I think that we still have a few-week window left for us to put the important measures in place that need to be put in place in order to avoid being in an Italy-like situation. Most of the public health experts at the moment are suggesting that these stay-at-home measures combined with increasing access to scarce resources like PPE, other measures like keeping non-essential businesses closed will help really flatten the curve of the spread of the coronavirus at the moment.
So going forward, one thing that I'm trying to understand is where personal freedoms come in and when health considerations come in. And Governor Cuomo today was talking about possibly forcing people to stay away from playgrounds or having individuals keep distances. I mean, what kind of legal precedent is there to kind of step in and sort of, I guess, remove personal freedoms in this type of scenario?
Yeah, generally speaking, states have pretty broad authority when it comes to protecting the health, safety, and welfare of their populations. We have this because of our Constitution and the 10th Amendment in particular, which reserves these powers for the states. But one of the things that public health is always trying to balance is, in particularly in a situation like we have right now, what does the best available science and evidence tell us in terms of how we balance the interests of the collective, the community at large, with those individual interests, and trying to strike a sensible balance where we're not overburdening civil liberties in the process of serving the broader community interests.
So I guess that there's a question, and the reason why I ask this is because people point to China and they say, well, this is an example of how an authoritarian government can be better than a democracy, because they could clamp down, and even if they threw people in jail or tracked them through their cell phones, they could get to people, track them down, figure out the path of the virus and stop it earlier. Do you think that that is an argument for sort of a heavier hand in these types of situations, or would you say that the evidence that we've gotten so far kind of supports the way things have been done here?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, the evidence around, for example, travel restrictions really don't demonstrate a strong correlation between stopping the spread of a disease or virus, like COVID-19. On the whole, though, we have different types of civil liberties in place in our legal system, and so we have a different playbook to work from here in that sense. And I think what this really does suggest is the need for increased preparedness efforts so that when other situations like this come up, we're able to respond to them quickly in terms of personnel and appropriate resources, and also just the types of medical interventions that we'll need to help flatten the curve.
Can you point to anything in particular that the U.S. did that was a failure or could have been done better that would have perhaps mitigated the spread?
Well, I think the folks at CDC and elsewhere in the federal government that are responding to the situation really are responding in real time and responding with the best science and evidence and facts that they have on hand. So I wouldn't really say that anything is a failure. I think what we've learned from this, and what I think we can take forward in other epidemics or pandemic situations, is the need to do that pre-planning, that initial preparedness planning, and to make sure that that planning process is very tight and is something that is regularly refreshed and something that people are focusing on throughout the year, rather than just something that comes up when we have a situation like we have right now. It puts a little bit of extra pressure on the planning.
Dr. Nicholas Diamond, thank you so much. Stay safe out there. Dr. Nicholas Diamond is a consultant working in health policy at the firm Avalier Health, also teaches in the faculty at Georgetown Law, joining us from Washington's metropolitan area. Coming up, we're going to talk more about the economy, what we can look to get some sort of guidance on just how big of a hit the coronavirus has been, as we look ahead with Carl Riccadonna, chief U.S. economist of Bloomberg Economics. I'm Lisa Abramowitz in for David Weston. This is Bloomberg Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Life. It's a funny old game, isn't it? 1 minute you're on top, the next, you need all the help you can get.
Yeah, later, yeah.
So make sure you're there for those around you. Don't just be a spectator. Be a supporter. Bleed for life. Join us at blood.co.uk.
The happy family of 3 were about to welcome a new member. That's right, they were finally getting a dog.
Buy on eBay, dog bed from £12.
First, they had to make a few adjustments.
Sell white rug.
And prepare the kids for the reality of owning a pet.
Buy biodegradable poop bags from under £6.
Everyone instantly fell in love with Little Rocky. Unfortunately, Little Rocky fell in love with a cushion. Buy, sell, eBay.
Delivery costs may apply.
First thing you think of when you hear cancer, that's it, it's finished.
All of a sudden your life becomes about appointments and this test and that test. But then you start to just thank God that those tests are there.
Every single day, nearly 1,000 people find out that they've got cancer.
These donations are absolutely crucial for all of the research to helping families like us.
Donate right now to Cancer Research UK.
For just £2 a month, you can make a real difference.
Thank you for your donations.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day, March 25th, 1972. UCLA men's basketball wins its 6th consecutive national basketball title.
UCLA has won its 6th consecutive NCAA basketball championship, and pandemonium reigns as delirious UCLA players are congratulated by their Florida State rivals as well as their fans.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, click on Sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we're taking a deep look at the way the coronavirus pandemic has rippled through every aspect of our lives, seemingly in a matter of days and weeks. Whether you're working from home, not working, or have to go to work, COVID-19 has changed everything. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Said expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/Seize Change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are surging. Best level of the day right now. Stocks rallying on hopes for stimulus. We'll keep you up to date with the very latest out of Washington. But here's where we stand in terms of the equity indexes and averages. S&P up 122 points right now. That is an advance of 5%. The S&P at 2569. Dow Jones Industrial Average back above 22,000, higher by 1,304 points, up 6.3%. The Dow now at 22,013. Nasdaq pushing higher, up 253 points. That is a gain of 3.4%. Nasdaq at 7670. Got to mention Boeing shares. They're surging by almost 30% today on stimulus hopes. Again, the Dow rallying 1,308 points. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Back we go as Balance of Power continues. Here she is, Lisa Abramowitz.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. And this portion of Bloomberg Balance of Power is brought to you by National Realty, NRIA, developers of high-return income-producing properties for investor partners. See them at nria.net. A lot of people are wondering what they can hang on to as far as a compass to know just how bad the carnage is from the fallout from the coronavirus. A lot of people looking to the initial jobless claims that we're going to receive tomorrow morning in New York. Carl Riccadonna certainly will be paying attention. He's chief U.S. economist with Bloomberg Economics, and he joins us now. Carl, I'd love to get your sense. How important will the numbers be tomorrow as sort of an instruction on how bad the job losses could potentially get?
Well, Lisa, good afternoon. I think it'll be important in a number of respects. First of all, it will give us some early insight into the extent of destruction in the labor market. Now, if we get a smaller number than expected tomorrow, my team's looking for about 1.7 million filings for unemployment benefits. The top end of the spectrum is closer, the forecast range is closer to 4 million. But if we get a small number tomorrow, that could simply mean that the logistics of state websites crashing and call centers being overwhelmed really just contain the number, and then we'll continue to see that surge basically reflected in next week and the week beyond that. So, I would be cautious about any kind of small number tomorrow, what the implication would be. The other important signal there, we're close to the finish line with the stimulus making its way through Congress, but we're not quite there yet. And it has to pass through both Senate and House and make it to the president's desk. Maybe tomorrow's number, if it's a dramatic number, will be enough to really catalyze the focus of Congress to get the stimulus measure passed as quickly as possible.
Carl, there's something that I'm really unclear on, and that's if you have all these people laid off, how quickly can they come back into the workforce if this is a temporary shock and a sort of sudden shock and a sort of orchestrated shutdown? Is there a sense that these jobs could just come back really quickly?
Well, for some types of employment, if it's a restaurant that shut down and can reopen, then those jobs will come back very quickly. But the longer the shutdown lasts, the more likely that disruptive income shock to the economy, not just household income, but business income, where if businesses have not paid the mortgage or the rent for the month, maybe landlords have nailed the front door shut, that can cause lasting damage, or missed debt payments would be another problem. So the longer this disruption, the worse the shock to the economy will be, and that's why it's so critical for all of these stimulus measures, whether it's unemployment benefits or small business loans, get put into place and start distributing funds as rapidly as possible.
Another thing that I'm unclear on is what happens with gig workers, right? People who are part of the gig economy, can they file for unemployment? Can they get these benefits?
Well, you would have to show records of employment. So if you're a black market type of worker cleaning houses and not filing, paying your employment taxes and whatnot, then you would not be eligible. But lots of gig employees would be eligible. Now, if you've had just a severe curtailment of hours, that's a different problem because technically you're still employed.
And also, have you had time to parse through some of the details of this $2 trillion stimulus?
We have published that on our terminal page here. So, we've dug through some of the details. Of course, the ink is not entirely dry because, again, it has to be approved by both the House and Senate.
So what's your sense of it? I mean, do you think that this will be truly supportive in the way that's required? Do you think it's a first step? Do you think it addresses the main points?
If we're talking about a shutdown that lasts from 30 to 60 days, then probably a $2 trillion stimulus price tag is just about right. But $2 trillion is a little bit misleading because a lot of that is money going to backstop programs and transfers to states and whatnot. If we're looking at just transfer payments to households and businesses, it's actually about half of that. It's about a $1 trillion hit to income. So again, in a short shutdown scenario, $1 trillion does the trick. But the later those funds arrive, the more costlier the damage to the economy. So if we're talking at this time next week and still waiting for a vote, then of course all of the necessary numbers move higher. For the time being, $2 trillion overall and $1 trillion in transfer payments is just about adequate.
For the time being, how long will that hold people over for?
Well, it should hold people over for a shutdown lasting 30 to 45, maybe even 60 days. If we're looking at a longer shutdown or we reopen too soon and then have to lock down again, then there will be a need for additional fiscal stimulus. But certainly that seems to be something that Congress is willing to consider.
Carl, I got to say, I always love speaking with you because I can just unleash all of my neurotic kind of worst case scenario pictures, and you can kind of calmly tell me where I'm right or where I'm wrong. And right now I'm looking at the scenario and feeling like we're on sort of this threshold or the tipping point between recession and depression. And I'm trying to get a sense of how far on that scale we are. Are we moving more toward depression? Are we really solidly in just the recession camp? What do you think?
I'm glad you asked that. I think
good. I'm glad.
And if we're just looking for a limited period of shutdown for the economy and things can, this passes and things manage to reopen up, then we'll be looking at a very lousy second quarter, maybe the worst quarter in the history of record keeping for U.S. GDP going back to the end of World War II. We could be looking at a 9% contraction, or in the downside scenario, even a 14% contraction, according to what my team is estimating. But that's navigable, assuming that we have this significant buffer from all of the Fed actions we've seen, as well as very substantial fiscal stimulus as well. One silver lining here, no matter how bad those jobless claims numbers are tomorrow, actually maybe bigger is better, because we know there's massive dislocation in the economy. So if we see a huge surge in unemployment filings, that at least shows that those households will have some income to supplement what they've lost from their employment. So it's certainly not good to be on the ranks of the unemployed as opposed to being employed, but those fiscal transfer checks will bridge a very critical gap at an important juncture for the economy and prevent the downturn from being even worse.
That's a great point, and I want to leave it on that silver lining, because I got to say, it's actually a really good point that if the number is really big, that means that all of those individuals will be receiving some steady stream of amplified income from the government as they wait for further employment. Carl Riccadonna, Bloomberg Economics Chief U.S. Economist, thank you so much for being with us. Stay healthy. All my best to you and your family. Just a reminder to everybody, all of the listeners who are working from home and elsewhere, Bloomberg Radio is available on all of your favorite apps, Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, iHeart, SiriusXM, TuneIn, as well as Bloomberg.com, and on the Bloomberg terminal by typing RADI GO, so you can catch all of the news here. And what we are looking at today is possibly the potential for a second straight day. We're seeing the S&P of gains. S&P up 4.4%, the NASDAQ up 2.8%, the Dow after its best gain since 1933 up 5.7%. We are looking at the second straight day of gains for the first time since February 12th. Coming up is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Life. It's a funny old game, isn't it? 1 minute you're on top, the next, you need all the help you can get.
Yeah, later, yeah.
So make sure you're there for those around you. Don't just be a spectator. Be a supporter. Bleed for life. Join us at blood.co.uk.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Apply by the 31st of March for a chance to win your first year in halls. Visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
First thing you think of when you hear cancer, that's it, it's finished.
All of a sudden your life becomes about appointments and this test and that test. But then you start to just thank God that those tests are there.
Every single day, nearly 1,000 people find out that they've got cancer.
These donations are absolutely crucial for all of the research to helping families like us.
Donate right now to Cancer Research UK.
For just £2 a month, you can make a real difference.
Thank you for your donations.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Mazur and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from our homes in New York and New Jersey, welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. It is Wednesday, March 25th, 2020. Carol Masser, along with my co-host Jason Kelly. And Jason, no doubt about it, look at the market surge, high expectations, stocks posting their first back-to-back gains since the virus crisis began. It's all about the stimulus package, what's expected to be in it, and yet, as you so rightly pointed out on our prep call,
we're in crisis. I mean, you look around New York. I was on the phone with a number of colleagues earlier today, and New York is a ghost town. New York City, it looks like I Am Legend, not to make light of it at all. This is a city that has been brought to its knees. You listen to Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York City. You listen to the governor of the state, Andrew Cuomo, and this is the sort of thing that's playing out across the country. So two very different pictures if you're just looking at the markets versus if you're looking at the reality on the ground in some of America's major cities.
We, too, have talked about that movie at home. All right. First of all, let's get a check on your top business stories and an update on the trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. Also working from home, but we've got you covered. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all surging. Right now, the S&P 500 index is up 101 points. That is a gain of 4.1%. The Dow higher by 1,108 points, up by 5.9%, 5.4% on the Dow, I should say. NASDAQ up 183 points. That's a gain right now of 2.5%. 10-year up 12.30 seconds with a yield of 0.80%. Gold is retreating down 1.3% at $16.11 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.6%. WTI right now is trading at just about $24.60 a barrel. So stocks extending gains. Bottom line, stimulus insights. Stay with Bloomberg for the latest. Bloomberg Business Week has got you covered. Again, recapping here, S&P 500 index up 96. That is a gain of 3.9%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. This portion of Bloomberg Business Week is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth number one in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. And as you heard Charlie say, Carol, stimulus in sight. Part of the problem, though, is the details. And the other challenge is what is happening, as we were just talking about a minute ago, here on the ground. And that is a very different reality. We're going to get into it from a number of angles.
Yeah, the devil's in the details, whether you're talking about the stimulus package or just what the medical community is facing on a day-to-day basis, hourly basis, if you will. We're going to hear from several CEOs. 3M, it's the cover story of the magazine this week. His CEO, the 3M CEO, and his team, they are on the front lines making the equipment that the world needs. So we're going to find out how exactly they're doing it. It's a fascinating story. We're also going to hear from Curaleaf's executive chairman on running his business during this time from a personal and professional level. So see what he has to say. He's been with us several times, so looking forward to that conversation.
We're also going to catch up later on in the show with Michael Moe. He runs Global Silicon Valley, very smart early stage investor, understands how the world is connected when it comes to especially venture capital money. We'll hear from him. He's all the way practically on the other side of the world checking in.
Yeah.
And we'll also, as we are getting accustomed to hearing, we will hear from that coronavirus task force at the White House, likely in the 5 o'clock hour.
All right, meantime, let's set the Business Week agenda. Michael McKee is International Economics and Policy Correspondent at Bloomberg News. He's with us along with Dave Wilson, Stocks Editor at Bloomberg News. Dave joining us on the phone from his home in New Jersey. Mike, I believe, is still in our Interactive Broker studio back in our New York studio. Mike, let's start with you. You've seen a lot of cycles. You've seen a lot of bailout programs. Markets are expecting a lot. What's your take? And in terms of some of the specific details that we're hearing, is this going to make a difference for companies, big, small, and otherwise, and individuals?
Oh, there's no question it'll make a difference. This is $2 trillion that could be leveraged up to $6 or $7 trillion. If we got to a total effective $6 trillion bill, that's 30% of GDP. So that's an enormous amount. I'm a little surprised you guys don't know what's in it and are looking for details. Copies of the bill are circulating around Capitol Hill. It's only about 1,200 pages long. So, I mean, you could have read that during a commercial.
I've gotten through the first 1,000, Mike. So just give me a break.
She's a speed reader.
That's the hard part. We know the broad general outlines,
right,
but the devil, as you say, will be in the details as we go through it.
All right, so Dave Wilson, the market clearly excited for the second day in a row. Is this stimulus trade going on? What's underneath the market sentiment here?
There is a fair amount of that stimulus trade going on. You need look no further than Boeing to see it. I mean, the shares are up 29.5% in today's trading. You know, part of the deal is to set up a loan fund that companies can take advantage of. And we've reported and others have reported that Boeing may be a beneficiary of that down the line. And on top of that, I mean, they're talking about restarting production of the 737 MAX jet in May. Of course, that plane's been grounded for more than a year because of the 2 fatal crashes that it experienced. And then you have the Brazilian company, Embraer, and that $4 billion deal to take an 80% stake in the regional jet makers' commercial area. That appears to be on track, even in the face of everything that Boeing has gone through. So, you know, you look at that company, it's clear there's a lot of focus on what's happening in Washington. You look at the airlines more generally, you see the same thing. American up 10%, United up 13%, Delta up 16% at the moment.
So, Mike, come on back in because, you know, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo already saying that the plan isn't complete. Hang on a sec. We're going to hear from another governor right now. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam is speaking. Let's listen in, everyone.
Years, and more than 1,500 volunteered just in the past month. Training is done online. We are looking for healthcare professionals, 18 or older, both current or previously licensed, as well as students. So I'd ask you, those that are able to volunteer and that are interested in volunteering, to please go to the website. It's VAMRC.org. I'll repeat that, VAMRC.org, if you are able and willing to help. To put our equipment needs in perspective, in normal times, each one of the providers I listed, each one of those 10 providers uses a new mask, a new gown, and gloves each time they go into a room to see a patient. 10 care providers, as I previously outlined, providing 24-hour care gets you to about 240 items of PPE in a day per patient. Now, if you multiply that by a hospital that, let's say, has 40 ICU patients, you're at 10,000 PPE items in a day per hospital in our Commonwealth. And then in addition to our hospital staff, we also have law enforcement. We have first responders, and we have firefighters, all of whom require and need PPE. So that is why the need for equipment for PPE is just so great. It is literally in the millions. I have encouraged our medical providers to postpone elective surgeries. Today, I will sign an executive order directing them to do so. This will preserve bed space and also equipment, including ventilators and PPE. As I said yesterday, we have put in our second request for PPE to the national stockpile. We are working with companies to donate PPE that they have available. And we are working to source more from private vendors. The cooperation that I have seen across the Commonwealth has just literally been tremendous. And to all of you that have stepped up to the plate and pitched in, I say thank you. I will add, because states are literally competing for supplies, the prices that we are seeing from some private vendors has jumped. That is why we need a nationally led response. Allowing the free market to determine availability and pricing is not the way we should be dealing with this national crisis at this time.
We've been listening to Virginia Governor Ralph Northam speaking about that state's preparedness, obviously of high interest to our listeners down in the area around the District of Columbia. Let's go back to our conversation about what the federal government is doing. Speaking of Washington, D.C., Michael McKee still with us, international economics and policy correspondent, and Dave Wilson, stocks editor for Bloomberg. Mike, I want to come back to you. As you said, the devil's in the details here. I think it's important also to bring in this idea of what the Fed and sort of the central bank side has been doing. Stitch that together for us to give us a complete picture of what this all looks like.
Well, the Fed was the first to move. They didn't have to wait and negotiate. They just brought back a lot of the lending programs, along with their rate cut, a lot of the lending programs that had been used in the 2008-2009 period for the great financial crisis. And then they added a couple more, and that's where the two things get tied together. They added the primary credit and secondary credit lending facilities, in which they set up special purpose vehicles to purchase corporate bonds, which the Fed isn't legally allowed to do by itself. And those are backstopped by the Treasury, a total of $30 billion going into those from the Exchange Stabilization Fund. So the Treasury takes the first risk because the Fed's not allowed to lose money. And so that's where the 4 to 6 trillion comes from. If indeed the Fed is going to be the vehicle for the Treasury Department to spend the $425 billion they're talking about in the stimulus bill for Treasury, then at a 10-to-1 ratio, as the two corporate bond programs do, you could come up with that kind of money. You could leverage it into that kind of lending for the economy.
Mike, I got to jump in, though, because I love it. As soon as this package or the details of it really kind of hit and everybody was talking about it, immediately New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's talking about it not being enough. And what's interesting is even, our own reporters putting out a story saying that this, it's a record stimulus package, no doubt about it, but it doesn't provide the much needed aid to small companies and Americans that are hit hard by the coronavirus. It's not going to prevent a big short-term hit to the U.S. economy, which is what I think we're all concerned about, and also a dramatic rise in unemployment, which, if anything we learned from the financial crisis, and I understand this isn't a financial crisis, is that having so many workers out of work, it took us a decade to get us back to where we were pre-coronavirus. And as you look at it and put on your economic hat, do you agree that it's lacking in those two areas, two important areas?
Well, it is lacking, but you've got a number of different things going on there. First of all, the unemployment rise is baked in. That's going to happen no matter what Congress did, because companies, especially service industries like restaurants and bars, were told last week, close. And so they just let everybody go. There's not much we can do about that. The question is, what is this bill going to provide in terms of money to keep people on the payrolls? The idea was that they would be able to pay companies something to retain their employees on payrolls. And we don't know, first of all, whether that means companies who've already let people go and could call them back, put them on the payroll and pay them. That detail lacking. And if not, how much are we going to need? Estimates are you'd need $1.5 trillion to be able to do that. And there's only something like $350 billion in there. So in that sense, it would be short. So we're not sure what they meant. Now, needing more money, the $1.5 trillion is over a period of time.
Yeah.
So how long is that? Could they come back and appropriate more? Sure, and people are kind of expecting them to do that. Now, the Cuomo remarks are a little different. What's going to happen to the states is not only do they have this extra expense of taking care of the people with the disease, but nobody's working, so the state's not collecting any taxes. They're not getting your withholding tax. They're not getting the sales taxes, except for the toilet paper you bought. So they're going to have big revenue shortfalls, and that's what Governor Cuomo was talking about, and I imagine Governor Northam would say the same thing. Cuomo said New York's going to get $3.8 billion in this bill, but they're expecting a revenue shortfall of $9 to $10 billion. And that's a problem for states because they have balanced budget amendments.
Right. Yeah.
So how do they fill that hole? So the feeling is Congress is going to have to come back and do some more.
So, Dave Wilson, last word to you. You know, you mentioned names like Boeing, the airlines, all doing well among this because they will be the clear beneficiaries. Will we start to see, in your estimation, over the next couple of days, or maybe even today, sort of winners and losers start to play out within the trade?
Well, we've certainly seen the losers over the last several weeks turn into the winners in the last couple of days. So there's that sort of back and forth in terms of volatility going on. But if you want to put it in that context, I mean, one thing that's interesting about today is you're seeing Google's owner, Alphabet's down, Facebook is down, Netflix is down. So, these are the kinds of companies that have been market leaders for more than a decade now. I talked about yesterday about how the NASDAQ 100 index is getting close to its 2000 high relative to the S&P 500. So to see this kind of a pullback, I mean, it gets your attention.
Maybe people are buying some other names today. I don't know. It's interesting. Dave Wilson, thanks so much. Dave's going to be back later on with his chart and stock of the day. In the meantime, let's get you caught up on your top business headlines, and let's get another look at that trading day with Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. Carol Massar, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ holding near their highs of the day. We've got the Dow up now by 1,122 points, up 5.4%. S&P up 98. That is a gain of 4%. NASDAQ up 172. Higher by 2.3%. As Dave mentioned, NASDAQ certainly lagging the rest of the market, at least the S&P 500 index. 10-year up 13.30 seconds with a yield there of 0.80%. Gold is down 1.3% right now at $16.11 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude rallying now up 3.3%, $24.81 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. So stocks on track to post their first back-to-back gains since the coronavirus crisis began. Investors are awaiting unprecedented government spending packages aimed at countering the hit from the pandemic. Again, you guys talking about Boeing shares and the airlines. Worth mentioning Boeing up now by 30.4%. Of course, a member of the Dow up by 1,142 points, up 5.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Let's go. Sorry, now to the nation's capital. Laura Davison is there. She is congressional tax reporter. She has been watching this so closely. She's probably read a lot more of that 1,200 pages than any of us have. Laura, great to have you with us. So give us some specifics that people can really sort of sink their teeth into in terms of what's in this bill.
So there's two big piles of money for businesses. One is for large businesses, corporations, state and also some state and local governments. And then there's a smaller pot of money that goes to small businesses. On the small business side, the idea here is really to keep workers employed. So there's incentives for small businesses to keep those workers on. They'll get some payments, and it's basically just to not lay people off. Larger business side, that's where you're looking at the money for airlines, potentially money for other travel industry businesses, and there's a lot of strings attached there. That is what Democrats have been pushing for the past several days, and kind of one of the holdups on getting this bill finalized, which is still not quite yet finalized. But so for there's some for CEO pay for things like stock buybacks or dividends. There's some restrictions there in order to get that money, and there's also oversight, which was not something that had been in the bill originally. So there will be an inspector general and an oversight panel to ensure that those funds are being spent as Congress intended.
So, Laura, what I do wonder about, though, is there probably are a lot of businesses and certainly restaurants and certainly the hotel industry, who have let workers go. So do we know, the devil's in the details, do we know that those workers that are let go, are they now taken care of as a result of this? How does it work?
Yeah, so there's sort of two answers there. One is there are some retroactive provisions in this bill. So if companies had, let's say they fired some people yesterday, had to lay some people off yesterday, they could go and hire those people back and still be able to avail themselves of some of these benefits. There are also some big new benefits here for unemployment insurance. So Chuck Schumer has said that basically the idea was to get people to 100% of their salary. They extended unemployment benefits for months. So for people who had already seen their jobs go away, there's some money in there for them. There's also a new payroll tax credit for businesses who have had to shut down mostly or completely, think of movie theater or something. Congress is giving them some big tax benefits if they keep their people on. It's a little bit of a tough sell if you have no revenue, still hard to keep payroll going, but there's a lot of different levers here that businesses can avail themselves of.
And Laura, one of the things that Mike McKee touched on just a few minutes ago, prompted by Carol, was this whole discussion about different states and governors and cities and whatnot, and sort of what they get and how they can use it. Help us understand some of the nuance there.
Yeah, so this is really probably the next fight we'll see brewing. So in this bill, there are lots of different there's a pot of money of about $150 billion that goes to state and local governments. There's also funding for Medicare that is kind of administered through the states. There's some money for hospitals. There's a lot of different line items that are all going to the states. But you've already seen Governor Cuomo as well as California talk about how this isn't going to be enough. So Congress is already eyeing a phase 4 and a phase 5 bill. This is phase 3 that we're on today. And I think that's really where the discussion is going to go of kind of what money do states need going forward? Because they say this isn't enough.
I'm just kind of sitting with that. So this is phase 3, right? Phase 4 and phase 5 to come, which to some extent is going to make sense because when we get on the other side of this, we will be able to assess even some of the more of the damage, right? In terms of businesses and to the economy, and we're going to continue to need assistance, Laura.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really, and just think though also about the size. So here, we're talking about $2 trillion almost. The first two phases were significantly smaller, but depending how long this lasts and sort of what the money that is needed, you could be looking at trillions more that would need to go out, both for the governments as well as states.
Are folks getting along? Are we finding that Republicans, Democrats are coming together and not making this, let me get something for my state, and in the process that they're thinking about, okay, what really needs to be done just for this crisis?
Well, it's all relative and really all hour by hour. Today, lawmakers are getting along a lot better than they were yesterday when they were still hashing out the final details of a bill. Expect that now sort of tensions are over in the House. They're still deciding exactly how they're going to proceed, whether they're going to call all their members back to vote or if they're going to do what's called unanimous consent, where they can basically do it with just a couple people in the room. However, if even one person objects, out of 435, then they will all have to come back and vote. And there's a lot of House members concerned that it isn't safe, that they should be sort of modeling the behavior that the White House and public health officials are promoting. So there is definitely some tension still in the building.
And so, Laura, in your estimation, as you talk to lawmakers, are there big holes that they feel like are going to have to be handled down the line? What are they hearing from constituents?
So they're really worried about kind of people who have already lost their jobs. So that is what the individual checks that are going out to people. Chuck Schumer said this morning those should be going out April 6th. There's a lot of indications that it won't be quite that quickly, but they're really concerned about people who are facing mortgage payments, rent payments in the next couple weeks. That's where they're concerned about. The White House had initially talked about doing 2 phases of checks, one in April and one in May of about $1,000 each. That's not in that bill, but that is another thing you could see coming back to if this extends for a very long time. You see unemployment go up, businesses stay closed. That's something that they're going to be very concerned about.
Hey, Laura, just one last question, and I am curious about I think what kind of surprised us all yesterday is the president this week kind of changing tune and talking a lot more about getting the U.S. economy reopened at this point. Is there any theme in terms or consensus when it comes to members of the U.S. Congress about that?
There's not really a consensus there about exactly how to approach it, but if you just look at the bill that they've put out today, or they're still having summaries, we'll expect the final text later today. This is assistance that is lasting for months, if not for the rest of the year. So at least on Capitol Hill, they're basically bracing for a business, economic, government shutdown that will last a lot longer than just to Easter, for example.
All right, Laura Davison, thank you so much, congressional tax reporter for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from D.C. It has been quite a marathon down there for our team, Carol, and certainly everybody up on Capitol Hill as they've gone back and forth. Not over yet. Certainly, as we've been discussing, a huge amount of optimism when it comes to the financial markets, but some skepticism, I think, to say the least, from other national leaders and certainly state and local leaders here in New York. And I know I keep coming back to that, and partially because I'm a little bit of a homer and a little bit parochial, but I do think it is important for folks to understand that, what is clearly, by the numbers, the epicenter of this crisis, right. The tone is very different. And so if you're just sitting in front of a screen and looking purely at the numbers, you may have a very different picture of what the world is like out there.
Well, and speaking of the world, everybody's approaching it differently and dealing with, becoming either, seeing cases peak and so on and so forth. I was looking at Germany. They're considering a timely, targeted, and temporary stimulus package when the crisis ends. So they're looking for kind of when we're through this. So everybody's approaching it differently, but I do think you're right, Jason. There's going to be certain parts of this country, and you're right, those of us who are right smack in the middle of New York or the New York metro area, we're seeing it firsthand, cities being shut down, communities, states being shut down. And so you can understand the fear and the tensions that someone like New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is facing. So we're going to continue covering this. Lots of other angles, including the medical angle. That's coming up next, folks. Stick around. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are on track for their first two-day advance since the coronavirus crisis began. Investors are awaiting details on the government's latest efforts to ease the sting of the pandemic. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 1,127, the S&P 500 up 97, the Nasdaq Composite up 166. With more Americans out of work due to COVID-19, credit card lenders are about to see a surge in missed and late payments. Some executives fear that even granting customers forbearance may only delay an inevitable default. Asbury Automotive is canceling its $1 billion purchase of Park Place dealerships as it looks to save cash. Asbury has about 3 dozen dealers, mostly in the Southeast. Texas-based Park Place has 17. Netflix says it has fixed an outage that left some subscribers unable to use its service for about an hour. The problem began to spike just after noon Eastern. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative, and that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. The market.
Coronavirus is affecting us all. During this difficult time, we're helping critical workers to make essential journeys by public transport. So, from Monday the 23rd of March, TfL will be operating a gradually reduced service on our network. Some stations will be closed so that we can keep key stations open. Night tube and night overground services have already stopped running, but our extensive night bus service will continue. The Waterloo and City line is now closed. We will keep you updated as our services change. Search TfL.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Apply by the 31st of March for a chance to win your first year in halls. Visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
It's a good job I'm a news agent, because I couldn't sit still at a desk. The urge to fidget is strong in me, but rather than fight it, I put it to good use, like making my own drum roll sound effects to celebrate tonight's rollover. I don't miss it.
Lotto, from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
At Asda, you can put all your eggs in one basket. Get 3 Easter eggs for just £8, like a Cadbury Twirl, Caramel Freddo, or our Asda Free From White Chocolate Egg. Easter egg faves without shelling out. Asda. Selected stores online, subject to availability. Eggs £3 each, 115 to 262 grams.
First thing you think of when you hear cancer, that's it, it's finished.
All of a sudden your life becomes about appointments and this test and that test. But then you start to just thank God that those tests are there.
Every single day, nearly 1,000 people find out that they've got cancer.
These donations are absolutely crucial for all of the research to help families like us.
Donate right now to Cancer Research UK.
For just £2 a month, you can make a real difference.
Thank you for your donations.
Leave it to the New York Times to make the most intelligent pop music podcast out there.
Welcome to the New York Times Popcast.
On the Popcast, the Times music staff gets together for a weekly roundtable on the hottest topics in popular music. From award show autopsies and reactions to new releases to difficult-to-process scandals and emerging themes in the music landscape, hear distinguished music critics share their perspectives on the latest music news, songs, albums, and artists of note on the New York Times Popcast. Search and favorite Popcast to join the conversation.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.